we begin a quiet descent into the annals of antiquity, allowing the present moment to recede gently. Our journey leads us back through the veiled corridors of time, towards a distant epoch, a world shaped by the slow turning of the seasons along a great river. We seek a place where the sands of ages have settled, preserving echoes of lives lived long ago under an unchanging sun. Our destination is ancient Egypt, not the Egypt of pharaohs from the earliest dynasties, but a later iteration, a Hellenistic realm, where the currents of Greek culture had long mingled with the deep traditions of the Nile. This was a period marked by the slow fusion of two powerful civilizations, a time of complex political currents and enduring dynasties. We will observe, without haste or urgency, the unfolding of events that shaped this particular corner of the ancient world. The focus of our quiet contemplation will be a figure whose name has resonated through millennia, a ruler who stood at the precipice of a changing world. We will trace the contours of her existence, from her earliest days within the royal palace of Alexandria to the final moments that sealed her place in history. Our approach will be one of calm observation, allowing the narrative to unfurl at its own measured pace, much like the slow, deliberate flow of the Nile itself. We are simply witnesses to the passage of time, watching as history quietly reveals its intricate patterns. As we settle into this ancient landscape, our awareness gently turns to the very essence of Egypt, the Nile River. It is a presence both immense and eternal, a silent, enduring witness to the countless generations that have lived and died along its fertile banks. For millennia, its rhythmic inundations brought forth life, sculpting the land and dictating the cycles of existence. The Nile was more than a river. It was the artery of a civilization, carrying not only water and silt, but also the echoes of countless human endeavours, ambitions and dreams. Its slow, deliberate current seemed to carry the very weight of history within its depths. We now find ourselves drifting towards the 1st century before the Common Era, a pivotal period within this Hellenistic age. Our focus narrows to a specific point along the Mediterranean coast, where the great river finally meets the sea, the city of Alexandria. This was not merely a port, it was a beacon of knowledge, a vibrant metropolis pulsating with intellectual curiosity and political intrigue. Founded centuries earlier by Alexander the Great, Alexandria had blossomed into a cosmopolitan hub, a melting pot of cultures, ideas, and peoples. Within its grand libraries, scrolls containing the wisdom of ages were meticulously preserved. Its lighthouse, the Pharos, was one of the wonders of the ancient world, guiding ships from distant lands to its bustling harbours. Here, in this city of grand avenues and imposing palaces, the Ptolemaic dynasty held sway, governing a kingdom that stretched from the desert sands to the fertile delta. The gentle lapping of the Mediterranean waves against its shores and the distant murmur of the Nile would have been the constant auditory backdrop to the lives of its inhabitants, including those within the royal household. It is within the intricate tapestry of this city that our story truly begins to unfold. As the gentle currents of the Nile flow onward, so too did the tides of power shift across the ancient world. The era into which we delve was one of profound transformation, a time when old empires slowly receded and new forces began to assert their dominance. The Ptolemaic kingdom, once a vibrant successor state to Alexander's vast dominion, now found itself in a precarious position. Its earlier grandeur had begun to dim, its once unassailable power gradually eroding under the weight of internal strife, dynastic rivalries, and a changing external landscape. Egypt, though still immensely wealthy and culturally rich, was no longer the undisputed power it once was. Its political independence, while still nominally intact, was becoming increasingly fragile. Across the Mediterranean, a formidable new power was steadily expanding its influence. Rome. The Roman Republic, with its disciplined legions and ambitious leaders, had grown from a city-state into a formidable entity, its reach extending across Italy, Gaul, Hispania, and much of the Greek world. Its shadow now loomed large over the eastern Mediterranean, a constant, undeniable presence. For the Ptolemies in Alexandria, Rome was a force that could not be ignored. It was a potential ally, a dangerous rival, and an ever-present threat. This intricate geopolitical tapestry was woven with threads of constant tension and shifting alliances. Kings and queens across the Hellenistic kingdoms found themselves navigating a complex web of diplomacy, often seeking Roman favour to bolster their own positions or to counter local adversaries. Treaties were made and broken, allegiances forged and shattered, as rulers sought to preserve their sovereignty in an increasingly interconnected and volatile world. The delicate balance of power was easily disturbed, and the smallest misstep could have far-reaching consequences. It was into this intricate, often turbulent political environment that the future queen would be born, destined to play a central role in its unfolding drama. To fully comprehend the world into which our subject would arrive, it is helpful to gently trace the lineage of her royal house back to its very beginnings. The Ptolemaic dynasty, which governed Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, emerged from the grand tapestry of Alexander the Great's conquests. Upon Alexander's sudden and untimely death in 323 BCE, his vast empire, stretching from Greece to India, was fragmented amongst his most trusted generals, the Diadochi. Among these ambitious and capable men was Ptolemy, son of Lagus, a Macedonian nobleman and one of Alexander's most loyal companions and generals. Ptolemy, later known as Ptolemy I Soter, meaning saviour, laid the foundational stones of this enduring dynasty. Recognizing the immense strategic and economic value of Egypt, he shrewdly claimed it as his satrapy, or province, in the initial division of the empire. Over time, as the other Diadochi fought among themselves, Ptolemy solidified his control, skillfully transforming Egypt from a mere province into an independent kingdom. In 305 BCE, he formally declared himself king, thereby establishing the Ptolemaic line that would rule Egypt until its final annexation by Rome. This dynasty presented a unique cultural blend. The Ptolemies were, at their core, Greek. They spoke Greek, practiced Greek customs, and embraced Hellenistic culture, transforming Alexandria into a shining beacon of Greek learning, art, and philosophy. Yet, they ruled over a land with an ancient, deeply rooted civilization, Egypt. For millennia, Egypt had been governed by pharaohs, seen as divine intermediaries between humanity and the gods. The Ptolemies, with remarkable pragmatism, adopted many of these pharaonic traditions, presenting themselves to their Egyptian subjects as legitimate successors to the pharaohs. They built temples in the traditional Egyptian style, participated in ancient rituals, and were depicted in Egyptian art with the regalia of pharaohs. This careful integration of Greek and Egyptian elements allowed the dynasty to maintain stability and legitimacy, even as their Greek identity remained central to their rule. It was a delicate balance, sustaining a Hellenistic court within the heart of an ancient land, a legacy that shaped the very identity of the kingdom and its future rulers. From the dynasty established by Ptolemy Soter, a long line of rulers emerged, each carrying the name Ptolemy, or in the case of the queens, Cleopatra, Arsinoe, or Berenice. Our subject, Cleopatra VII Philopator, stands as the final active pharaoh of this illustrious yet ultimately fading Ptolemaic kingdom. Her story is intrinsically woven into the fabric of this lineage, a direct descendant of the very first Ptolemy, and thus this of Macedonian Greek heritage. To understand Cleopatra, it is essential to appreciate the deep roots of her family tree. She was the daughter of Ptolemy the 12th Auletes, a ruler whose reign was marked by political instability and heavy reliance on Roman support. Her mother's identity is less certain, though it is widely believed to have been Cleopatra the 5th Tryphena, who was also her father's sister or cousin, a common practice within the Ptolemaic royal family to maintain the purity of their Macedonian bloodline. This tradition of sibling marriage, while shocking to modern sensibilities, was a deliberate echo of ancient Egyptian pharaonic custom, further cementing their adopted legitimacy in the eyes of their Egyptian subjects, while simultaneously preserving their distinct Greek identity. Tracing back further, we find a succession of Ptolemies and Cleopatras, each contributing to the complex tapestry of the dynasty. Ptolemy the 12th was the son of Ptolemy the 9th Lathyrus, who in turn was the son of Ptolemy the 8th Physcon. These were generations of rulers navigating internal power struggles, assassinations, and the ever-growing shadow of Rome. Each generation reinforced the Greek character of the Ptolemaic court, even as they ruled over an ancient Egyptian land. Their names, their language, their customs, all remained firmly rooted in the Hellenistic world, a world that had been forged by Alexander the Great and meticulously nurtured by Ptolemy I. Cleopatra VII, therefore, was not merely an Egyptian queen. She was the culmination of nearly 3 centuries of Greek rule in Egypt. Her ancestry connected her directly to the generals who had carved up Alexander's empire, to the Macedonian homeland, and to the Hellenistic culture that had flourished in Alexandria. This heritage shaped her education, her worldview, and her political ambitions, setting the stage for her remarkable and ultimately tragic reign. She was born into a dynasty that had long balanced its Greek identity with its role as pharaohs of Egypt, a duality that would profoundly influence her own approach to power and diplomacy. Into this complex world of ancient tradition and encroaching Roman power, Cleopatra VII Philopator was born, likely in the year 69 BCE. Her birthplace was Alexandria, the vibrant capital city, a centre of learning and commerce, then where the lighthouse of Pharos pierced the Mediterranean sky, and the library held countless scrolls of ancient wisdom. Yet, despite the grandeur of her surroundings, the circumstances of her early life were far from serene. The Ptolemaic throne, which she was destined one day to occupy, was already a precarious seat. Her father, Ptolemy XII, was known by the epithet Auletes, meaning the flute player, a nickname that perhaps hinted at a preference for cultural pursuits over the harsh realities of governance, or perhaps reflected a Roman jest at his perceived weakness. His reign was characterized by profound political instability. The once mighty Ptolemaic kingdom, rich in resources and strategically vital, had become increasingly dependent on the Roman Republic. This dependence was not a choice born of strength. It was but a necessity forced by internal dissent and the immense power of its growing neighbour. Ptolemy XII. Auletes struggled to maintain control, constantly seeking to appease Rome and secure his position. This often involved substantial payments to influential Roman figures, draining the royal treasury and leading to widespread discontent among his own subjects. The kingdom faced internal revolts and challenges to his authority, reflecting a deep-seated dissatisfaction with his rule and the perceived humiliation of Egyptian subservience to Rome. The shadow of Roman intervention loomed large over Alexandria, a constant reminder of Egypt's diminishing sovereignty. Cleopatra would have grown up amidst these tensions. Her formative years were spent in a palace where political intrigue was a daily affair, where the whispers of Roman envoys mingled with the anxieties of local officials. The air was thick with the scent of incense, but also with the unspoken fears of a kingdom teetering on the edge of complete absorption by the burgeoning Roman Empire. The vast wealth of Egypt, once a source of strength, now made it an irresistible prize in the eyes of Rome, and Ptolemy XII's struggles served as a stark illustration of this perilous reality. This environment, fraught with danger and shifting allegiances, would undeniably shape the young princess, preparing her perhaps unknowingly for the formidable challenges that lay ahead. The city of Alexandria, where Cleopatra spent her childhood, was a marvel of the ancient world. It stood as a beacon of Hellenistic civilization, a vibrant metropolis at the crossroads of continents. From its shores, either the magnificent lighthouse of Pharos, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, cast its guiding light far across the Mediterranean. This colossal structure, a testament to Ptolemaic engineering and ambition, symbolized the city's role as a nexus of trade and navigation. Its sheer scale and enduring presence would have been a constant backdrop to Cleopatra's early years, a silent witness to the daily rhythms of the bustling port. At the heart of Alexandria's intellectual life was the Great Library, an unparalleled repository of knowledge. Its vast collections of papyrus scrolls drew scholars, philosophers, and scientists from across the known world. Within its hallowed halls, minds grappled with mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and literature, pushing the boundaries of human understanding. Cleopatra, and growing up within the royal palace that was part of this intellectual complex, would have been exposed to this extraordinary environment from a very young age. The proximity to such a profound centre of learning would have offered her an education far beyond the ordinary, fostering a keen intellect and a broad understanding of diverse cultures and languages. Alexandria itself was a melting pot of peoples. Greeks, Egyptians, Jews, Syrians, and many others lived and traded within its walls, creating a rich tapestry of customs and beliefs. This diverse population contributed to the city's cosmopolitan atmosphere, where different languages were spoken in the marketplaces and various deities were worshipped in their respective temples. The sounds, sights, and smells of this vibrant urban landscape would have filled Cleopatra's senses. The murmur of foreign tongues, the aroma of exotic spices, the glint of sunlight on the polished marble of grand public buildings. This environment was stimulating in the extreme. It was a place where ideas flowed freely, where the latest philosophical debates were discussed, and where scientific discoveries were celebrated. For a young princess destined for leadership, such an upbringing provided an invaluable foundation. It offered not just formal instruction, but an immersive education in the complexities of the world, in the art of diplomacy, and in the nuances of human interaction. The Alexandrian cradle, with its blend of intellectual rigour and cultural diversity, undoubtedly shaped Cleopatra into the formidable and multilingual ruler she would become. For Xi'an, Cleopatra's early education adhered closely to the established traditions for Ptolemaic royalty, emphasizing a comprehensive Greek curriculum designed to cultivate a sophisticated and capable ruler. This was not merely an academic pursuit, but a rigorous preparation for the immense responsibilities of kingship in a complex Hellenistic world. A central pillar of this education was rhetoric. The art of persuasive speech, of crafting compelling arguments, and of commanding an audience was considered indispensable for any monarch. Cleopatra would have spent countless hours studying the works of classical Greek orators, analysing their techniques, and practising her own delivery. This training aimed to hone her ability to articulate policies, negotiate with foreign dignitaries, and inspire loyalty among her subjects, these skills that would prove critical throughout her reign. Philosophy also formed a significant component of her studies. Exposure to the ideas of Plato, Aristotle, and the various Hellenistic schools of thought would have encouraged critical thinking and provided frameworks for ethical governance. She would have explored concepts of justice, leadership, and the ideal state, grappling with the theoretical underpinnings of power and authority. This philosophical grounding would have equipped her with a deeper understanding of human nature and the societal structures she was destined to oversee. Mathematics, too, played a practical role in her royal education. Beyond mere arithmetic, this included geometry, astronomy, and the principles of engineering, all vital for managing a vast kingdom. Understanding land measurement, calendar systems, and the logistics of large-scale construction projects was essential for effective administration. These quantitative skills underscored the practical demands of ruling, connecting abstract thought to the tangible realities of governing Egypt. Furthermore, Cleopatra received an intensive education in the principles of governance itself. This encompassed the history of the Ptolemaic dynasty, the intricacies of Egyptian law, and the diplomatic protocols of the Hellenistic kingdoms and the burgeoning Roman Republic. She would have learned about the delicate balance of power, the management of resources, and the strategic considerations necessary to maintain Egypt's fragile independence. This traditional Greek education, comprehensive and demanding, was meticulously designed to forge a ruler capable of navigating the turbulent political landscape of her era. Among Cleopatra's many intellectual gifts, her extraordinary facility with languages stands out as particularly remarkable and politically astute. While her predecessors, the earlier Ptolemaic rulers, had largely confined themselves to Greek, the language of their Macedonian heritage, Cleopatra made a conscious and significant departure from this tradition. She was reportedly the first of her dynasty to master the ancient Egyptian language, a feat that held immense symbolic and practical weight. For nearly 3 centuries the Ptolemies had ruled Egypt, yet they had largely remained detached from the language of their subjects, relying on interpreters for communication beyond the Hellenistic elite. Cleopatra's embrace of Egyptian was a profound gesture, signalling a deeper connection to the land and its people, an act that undoubtedly resonated with the native population. This linguistic bridge allowed her to communicate directly with her priests, officials, and the wider populace, fostering a sense of shared identity that had long been absent from the royal court. Beyond Egyptian, her linguistic prowess extended to numerous other tongues relevant to the diverse and interconnected world of the Eastern Mediterranean. She was fluent in Latin, the language of the rising Roman power, enabling her to engage directly with Roman generals, senators, and emperors without the mediating filter of translation. This direct communication would have allowed for more nuanced negotiations and a clearer understanding of Roman intentions and demands, a crucial advantage in an era of increasing Roman dominance. Furthermore, accounts suggest she also spoke Hebrew, Aramaic, and possibly other Semitic languages, reflecting the cosmopolitan nature of Alexandria and the significant Jewish and Syrian populations within her kingdom and along its borders. This multilingualism was not merely a personal accomplishment, it was a powerful tool of statecraft. It allowed her to engage personally with a wide array of foreign emissaries and her own diverse subjects, fostering trust and facilitating diplomacy in a manner inaccessible to her Greek-speaking predecessors. Her ability to converse directly with people from different cultural backgrounds, to understand their perspectives in their own tongue, had granted her a unique advantage in a world where communication was often slow and prone to misunderstanding. This linguistic fluency undoubtedly contributed to her reputation for charm and intelligence, allowing her to forge deeper connections and exert a more direct influence on the complex political landscape of her time. It was a subtle yet potent assertion of her authority and a testament to her keen understanding of the practicalities of power. While specific records detailing Cleopatra's individual tutors are scarce, the intellectual environment of Alexandria suggests a rich array of potential mentors who would have shaped her formative years. The Ptolemaic court, with its long tradition of patronage for scholars and philosophers, undoubtedly provided access to some of the finest minds of the Hellenistic world. It is reasonable to surmise that she would have been instructed by Greek rhetoricians, philosophers, and scientists who resided at the Museum and Library of Alexandria. These individuals, beyond imparting factual knowledge, would have instilled in her the Hellenistic worldview, emphasizing logic, critical inquiry, and the art of persuasion. Her education in rhetoric, for instance, would have been guided by masters of the discipline, teaching her not only how to construct compelling arguments, but also how to understand the motivations and vulnerabilities of others. This training would prove invaluable in her later political dealings. Beyond academic instruction, Cleopatra's political acumen likely benefited from exposure to seasoned court officials and strategists. Her father, Ptolemy XII Auletes, despite his struggles, would have had advisors and ministers who navigated the intricate web of Roman politics and Egyptian internal affairs. Observing these figures, listening to their counsel, and perhaps even participating in discussions from a young age, would have offered her a practical education in governance and diplomacy. She would have witnessed firsthand the challenges of maintaining power in a volatile geopolitical landscape. Furthermore, the influence of older, politically experienced women within the royal household cannot be overlooked. While their specific roles are not detailed, royal courts often feature figures who guide younger generations in the subtle arts of courtly life, alliance building, and maintaining influence. These women might have provided informal but crucial mentorship, offering insights into the dynamics of power and the intricate social codes of the Alexandrian court. It is also plausible that she benefited from the guidance of individuals with a deep understanding of Egyptian culture and religion, especially given her unique efforts to learn the Egyptian language. Priests or scribes associated with the temples might have contributed to her understanding of the indigenous traditions, which she later skillfully integrated into her image as pharaoh. These diverse influences, intellectual and practical, formal and informal, would have collectively moulded Cleopatra into the astute and formidable ruler she was destined to become, preparing her to confront the immense challenges that lay ahead for her kingdom. As young princess within the Ptolemaic court, Cleopatra would have been a silent observer of the intricate and often perilous power dynamics that defined her family's reign. The Alexandrian palace, a place of immense privilege and intellectual vibrancy, was simultaneously a crucible of ambition, betrayal, and shifting loyalties. She would have witnessed the subtle maneuvers and overt clashes between factions, vying for influence over her father, Ptolemy XII Auletes. The Ptolemaic dynasty was by this point weakened by internal strife and a succession of often ineffectual rulers. Cleopatra would have seen courtiers plotting, alliances forming and dissolving, and the constant struggle to maintain control over the diverse elements of Egyptian society. These observations, though perhaps not fully understood in her earliest years, Dos would have slowly built within her a profound understanding of political maneuvering, the art of persuasion, and the critical importance of cultivating loyalties while neutralizing threats. More significantly, the growing shadow of Roman intervention would have been an ever-present concern within the palace walls. Rome's influence in the eastern Mediterranean was expanding inexorably, and Egypt, with its vast wealth and strategic grain supply, was a tempting prize. Cleopatra would have seen her father, Ptolemy XII, repeatedly humbled by Roman demands, forced to pay immense sums and make significant concessions to secure his throne. She would have observed the arrival of Roman envoys, the negotiations, and the palpable tension whenever Roman legions were mentioned. The exile of her father in 58 BCE, when driven from Alexandria by an angry populace weary of his pro-Roman policies and high taxes, would have been a particularly stark lesson. During this period, Cleopatra likely remained in Alexandria, witnessing the chaos and the temporary reigns of her elder sister, Tryphena, and later her other sister, Berenice IV. This experience would have underscored the fragility of royal power and the profound impact of Roman political will on Egyptian sovereignty. These early observations, made from the periphery of power, provided Cleopatra with an unparalleled education in the harsh realities of governance and the pervasive threat posed by the burgeoning Roman Republic. They forged in her a deep-seated understanding of the precarious position of her kingdom and the urgent need for a ruler who could navigate these dangerous waters with unparalleled skill. The year 58 BCE marked a profound turning point for the Ptolemaic dynasty and for the young Cleopatra. Her father, Ptolemy XII Auletes, facing mounting discontent from his own people, was forced to flee Egypt. The Alexandrian populace, weary of his perceived weakness and his exorbitant taxes levied to appease Rome, rose up against him. Ptolemy XII, unable to secure his position, sought refuge in Rome, hoping to secure military intervention to reclaim his throne. During his absence, a period of significant instability gripped Egypt. Initially, his elder daughter, Tryphena, ruled briefly, followed by Cleopatra's sister, Berenice IV, who seized the opportunity to establish her own claim to the throne. This tumultuous period, witnessed by Cleopatra, would have vividly illustrated the precariousness of power and the volatile nature of public opinion. She saw how quickly a monarch could be overthrown and the desperate lengths to which a ruler might go to regain their position. Ptolemy XII spent over 2 years in Rome, manoeuvring through the intricate and often corrupt world of Roman politics, desperately seeking support for his restoration. He engaged in extensive lobbying, making lavish promises and incurring immense debts to influential Roman figures. The cost of this lobbying and the eventual military aid would be astronomical, further burdening an already struggling Egyptian economy. Finally, in 55 BCE, Ptolemy XII returned to Egypt, not as a conquering hero, but as a king reinstated by foreign force. He was accompanied by Aulus Gabinius, the Roman proconsul of Syria, and his legions. This military intervention was decisive. Berenice IV was deposed and subsequently executed, a brutal act that would have left an indelible impression on Cleopatra. The restoration of Ptolemy XII came at a heavy price. Egypt was now deeply indebted to Roman creditors, and the presence of Roman troops, particularly Gabinius's forces, represented a tangible symbol of Roman dominance. Cleopatra would have observed first-hand the profound political cost of her father's return. Egypt's sovereignty was further compromised, its treasury depleted, and its king was now undeniably a client of Rome. This period of exile and forceful return served as a stark lesson for Cleopatra, revealing the absolute necessity of Roman favour, the exorbitant price of that favour, and the ruthless measures required to secure and maintain a throne in such a precarious geopolitical landscape. The tumultuous events surrounding her father's exile and subsequent Roman-backed restoration provided Cleopatra with an invaluable, albeit harsh, education in the realities of Ptolemaic power in the mid-1st century BCE. She witnessed firsthand the absolute necessity of Roman favour for the very survival of her dynasty. The narrative of her father's return was not one of independent triumph, but of dependence. Without Roman legions, Ptolemy XII would likely have remained in exile, and the Ptolemaic line might have been extinguished or irrevocably altered. This experience would have deeply impressed upon Cleopatra the understanding that Egypt, as once a formidable empire, could no longer dictate its own destiny without external validation from the burgeoning power in the West. The Roman Republic was not merely a distant ally, it was the ultimate arbiter of royal authority in the Hellenistic East. To disregard Roman interests or to fall out of their favour was to invite catastrophe, as her father's flight and the fate of her sister Berenice IV clearly demonstrated. Cleopatra would have absorbed the critical lesson that diplomacy with Rome was not merely about maintaining good relations, but about securing the continued existence of the Ptolemaic kingdom itself. It was a relationship of profound asymmetry, where Egypt, despite its ancient heritage and wealth, was increasingly in a subordinate position. The Roman military might and political influence were undeniable, casting a long shadow over Alexandria. The immense debts incurred by Ptolemy XII to secure Roman support were another stark reminder. These financial obligations tied Egypt even more closely to Rome, creating a powerful economic lever that Rome could wield at will. Cleopatra would have recognized that the kingdom's treasury was not solely for its own people, but also for placating and rewarding Roman patrons. This period instilled in Cleopatra a deep understanding of the delicate balance required to navigate the Roman sphere of influence. It was not enough to simply exist. One had to actively cultivate powerful Roman allies, understand their internal political currents, and avoid any action that might provoke their ire. The survival of her family, and ultimately her own future as a ruler, depended entirely on mastering this complex and often perilous relationship. The dangers of incurring Roman wrath were not abstract. They were demonstrated through the deposition of her father and the execution of her sister, vivid examples of the consequences of failing to secure or maintain Roman approval. The Ptolemaic tradition of co-rule presented a unique challenge to the stability of the Egyptian throne. Unlike many monarchies where a single heir typically ascended, the Ptolemies frequently governed as siblings, often brother and sister, a practice rooted in both Hellenistic custom and ancient Egyptian pharaonic tradition. This arrangement, while seemingly designed to ensure a broad base of royal authority and continuity, paradoxically became a fertile ground for intense rivalries and devastating power struggles. For generations, the history of the Ptolemaic dynasty was punctuated by bitter conflicts between royal siblings, each vying for ultimate control. These struggles often escalated into civil wars, assassinations and exiles, weakening the kingdom and further inviting external interference. The very structure intended to fortify the succession often served to unravel it. The shared claim to the throne, rather than fostering unity, frequently ignited fierce competition for singular dominance. Cleopatra would have been acutely aware of this perilous inheritance. The annals of her own family were replete with examples of siblings turning against one another. Her immediate predecessor, her sister Berenice IV, had seized power during their father's exile, only to be executed upon his Roman-backed return. This recent and brutal event underscored the lethal potential of Ptolemaic co-rule. The throne was rarely large enough for two ambitious monarchs, and the stakes were nothing less than life and death. This dynastic tradition meant that succession was rarely a peaceful transition. Instead, it was a crucible, testing the ambition, cunning, and ruthlessness of each royal sibling. The concept of shared power often devolved into a contest of wills, where alliances shifted, loyalties were tested, and the support of the Alexandrian populace, the court, and crucially foreign powers like Rome, became paramount. Cleopatra, as a royal daughter, knew that her future would likely involve such a partnership, and the inherent dangers it carried. She would not simply inherit a crown. She would inherit a complex and often deadly dance with a co-ruler, one whose interests might inevitably clash with her own. The weight of this tradition, laden with historical precedent of fratricide and sororicide, was a heavy burden, a premonition of the challenges that lay ahead in her own ascent to power. The throne awaited her, but it was a throne designed for two, yet perpetually contested by one. In the spring of 51 BCE, the long and tumultuous reign of Ptolemy the 12th Auletes, the flute player, drew to its close. After years marked by exile, Roman intervention, and a constant struggle to maintain his shaky throne, the aging king succumbed to illness. His death marked not an end to dynastic uncertainty, but rather the beginning of a new chapter, one already fraught with the familiar tensions of Ptolemaic succession. Before his passing, Ptolemy XII had carefully prepared his last will and testament, a document intended to secure the future of his kingdom and, crucially, to safeguard it from the kind of internal strife that had plagued his own rule. Recognizing the formidable power of Rome, he entrusted the guardianship of his children and the stability of Egypt to the Roman Senate. This act was a clear acknowledgement of Egypt's diminished sovereignty, a testament to the inescapable reality of Roman influence. His will stipulated a joint rule, a continuation of the Ptolemaic tradition. The throne was to be shared by his eldest surviving child, Cleopatra, who was then approximately 18 years of age, and her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, a boy of about 10. This arrangement was not merely a ceremonial gesture. It was intended to establish a dual monarchy, with both siblings holding the title of pharaoh. For Cleopatra, this meant a sudden and profound shift in her life. From a princess preparing for an eventual role, she was now a reigning queen, albeit one bound by the dictates of her father's will in the presence of a co-ruler. Her youth and the significant age gap with her brother Ptolemy XIII immediately suggested an imbalance of power, at least initially. Her maturity and political acumen, honed by years of observing her father's struggles, would likely give her an early advantage. The young Ptolemy XIII, still a child, would naturally be influenced by the regents and advisors around him, individuals who would inevitably seek to assert their own influence within the court. This dynamic set the stage for the inevitable power struggle that had become a hallmark of Ptolemaic co-rule. The will intended to bring order, and instead planted the seeds of future conflict, a quiet ticking towards the next great challenge for the Egyptian throne. The stage was now set for Cleopatra's direct engagement with the complexities of power. The initial period of Cleopatra's joint rule with her younger brother Ptolemy XIII commenced with an inherent imbalance. Cleopatra, at 18, possessed a maturity and a direct understanding of court politics that far surpassed her 10-year-old sibling. Her years spent observing her father's desperate maneuvers to retain power, her exposure to Roman diplomacy, and her comprehensive education had forged in her a formidable ambition and a practical grasp of governance. She was not merely a figurehead, she intended to rule. From the outset, Cleopatra asserted her seniority and authority. All royal decrees and coinage from this early period often featured her name prominently, sometimes even exclusively, or placed before that of her brother. This was a subtle yet unmistakable declaration of her primary position within the co-regency, a quiet challenge to the traditional equality implied by joint rule. She understood that symbols held power, and she utilized them to project an image of singular leadership. However, the young Ptolemy XIII was not without his own support. A powerful faction within the Alexandrian court quickly coalesced around him, effectively acting as his regents. This group included figures such as Theodotus, his tutor, Achillas, a military commander, and most significantly Pothinus, a eunuch who served as his chief minister. These individuals, seasoned in the intricate web of Ptolemaic court politics, viewed Cleopatra's assertive approach as a threat to their own influence and to the traditional order they sought to uphold. The regents likely perceived Cleopatra's intelligence and strong will as dangerous to their control over the young king. They understood that a dominant queen would leave little room for their own ambitions. Thus, from the very beginning, the joint rule was not a harmonious partnership, but a simmering contest for authority. The regents of Ptolemy XIII began to subtly, and then more overtly, undermine Cleopatra's position, setting the stage for the intense struggle that would soon erupt between the royal siblings and their respective factions. The court became a silent battlefield, where every edict and every public appearance carried unspoken weight. The tension that quietly simmered during the initial phase of co-regency soon erupted into a more overt power struggle. Cleopatra, driven by her understanding of Egypt's precarious position and her own capabilities, sought to consolidate her authority, believing herself to be the more competent ruler for the challenges ahead. She understood that a divided leadership would only weaken Egypt further in the eyes of Rome and its own populace. Her efforts to assert her sole authority manifested in various ways. Beyond the symbolic placement of her name on documents and coinage, she began to take a more active and visible role in the daily administration of the kingdom. She engaged with the various factions within the Alexandrian bureaucracy, cultivated relationships with key military figures, and sought to project an image of a strong and independent monarch. This was a direct challenge to the traditional male dominance within the Ptolemaic court, which, while accustomed to powerful queens, still expected the ultimate authority to reside with the male pharaoh. This assertive stance naturally met with considerable resistance from the regents of Ptolemy XIII. Pothinus, Theodotus, and Achilles, who had effectively taken control of the young king, viewed Cleopatra's ambition as a direct threat to their own power and influence. They began to actively undermine her decisions, spread rumours, and foster discontent among the populace and the army. Their strategy was to isolate Cleopatra, stripping her of her support base and making it impossible for her to govern effectively. The struggle was not merely one of personalities but also of ideology. Cleopatra represented a break from the traditional, often complacent Ptolemaic approach to governance, advocating for a more proactive and decisive leadership. Her opponents, conversely, sought to maintain the status quo, which often meant managing the kingdom through the manipulation of a child king. They played upon the established norms of male succession and the inherent distrust of a powerful female ruler among certain segments of the elite. As the conflict escalated, the court became a battleground of political maneuvering and intrigue. Each side sought to outmaneuver the other, employing spies, propaganda, and alliances. Cleopatra's attempts to rule independently were systematically obstructed, leading to a growing frustration and a deepening chasm between the royal siblings and their respective supporters. This internal strife further destabilized the kingdom, demonstrating the inherent fragility of the Ptolemaic system of co-rule when faced with strong competing wills. The escalating power struggle within the Alexandrian court eventually reached a critical point. The powerful eunuch Pothinus, who effectively managed the royal household, and General Achilles, the commander of the Egyptian army, grew increasingly wary of Cleopatra's ambition and her efforts to diminish their influence. Aligned firmly with Ptolemy XIII, they orchestrated a move that would fundamentally alter the course of Cleopatra's early reign. Recognizing the threat she posed to their control over the young king, Pothinus and Achilles made a decisive move to remove Cleopatra from the capital. It was a calculated act of political expulsion, and designed to strip her of her immediate power base and prevent her from rallying support within Alexandria. Under their direction, Cleopatra was effectively forced to flee, leaving the vibrant city that had been her home and the seat of her ancestral power. Her journey led her eastward, beyond the borders of Egypt, to the neighbouring region of Syria. This was not a retreat born of defeat, but rather a strategic withdrawal. Cleopatra understood that her position in Alexandria had become untenable, and to remain would have likely resulted in her capture or even her death. In Syria she found a temporary sanctuary, a place where she could regroup and plan her next move away from the direct reach of her brother's powerful regents. During this period of exile, far from the intrigues of the Alexandrian court, Cleopatra began to gather her own forces. She leveraged existing alliances, appealed to loyalists within Egypt, and recruited mercenaries from the surrounding regions. This was a challenging undertaking, requiring significant resources and diplomatic skill. She drew upon her family's wealth and her own persuasive abilities to build a personal army, composed of diverse elements, all bound by their allegiance to her. The formation of this army in Syria marked a critical turning point. It transformed Cleopatra from a deposed queen into a formidable contender. She was no longer merely a claimant to the throne, but a military leader, prepared to fight for her rightful position. This period of exile, though initially a setback, ultimately hardened her resolve and provided her with the opportunity to forge a direct instrument of her will, for setting the stage for a military confrontation for the throne of Egypt. While Cleopatra was consolidating her forces in Syria, preparing for her return to Alexandria, an event of monumental significance unfolded in the wider Roman world, one that would irrevocably alter the fate of Egypt and her own destiny. In the year 48 BCE, the long-simmering civil war between two of Rome's most powerful figures, Julius Caesar and Gnaeus Pompey Magnus, reached its dramatic climax. Following his decisive victory over Pompey at the Battle of Pharsalus in Greece, Caesar pursued his defeated rival across the Mediterranean. Pompey, seeking refuge and assistance, fled to Egypt, a kingdom that had long maintained a complex and often subservient relationship with Rome. He hoped to find sanctuary and military support from the young Ptolemy XIII and his powerful regents Pothinus and Achillas, who at that moment held the reins of power in Alexandria. However, the Alexandrian court, in a move of cold political calculation, decided that aligning with a defeated Pompey would be a dangerous gamble. Instead, they opted to demonstrate their loyalty to the triumphant Caesar. Upon Pompey's arrival near Pelusium, the easternmost port of Egypt, he was treacherously assassinated on the orders of Pothinus and Achillas. His head was then severed, intended as a grim gift for Caesar, a macabre token of their allegiance. When Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt shortly thereafter, expecting to confront his rival, he was instead presented with Pompey's head. The gesture, intended to appease him, reportedly filled Caesar with revulsion rather than satisfaction. He saw it not as an act of loyalty, but as a barbaric betrayal of a Roman consul and his own son-in-law. Caesar's unexpected arrival in Egypt and his reaction to Pompey's fate immediately threw the Alexandrian court into disarray. This sudden influx of Roman power, embodied by Caesar himself, created a profound political vacuum and an extraordinary opportunity. The Ptolemaic court under the sway of Ptolemy XIII and his regents was now forced to contend directly with the supreme Roman general. Their actions regarding Pompey had placed them in a precarious position, and Caesar's presence demanded a swift and decisive response. For Cleopatra, who was at this very moment gathering her army on the Syrian border, Caesar's arrival represented an unforeseen and potent external force, a new variable in her struggle for the throne. It was an opening, a moment of profound instability that she, with her keen political instincts, would soon recognize and endeavor to exploit. The stage was set for a dramatic intersection of Roman might and Egyptian ambition. With Caesar now firmly established in the royal palace in Alexandria, attempting to mediate the dispute between the royal siblings, Cleopatra recognized that conventional approaches would be insufficient. Her path to Caesar was blocked by her brother's powerful regents, Pothinus and Achillas, who controlled access to the palace and sought to prevent any direct communication between the exiled queen and the Roman general. They understood that a personal encounter could shift the delicate balance of power. Cleopatra, however, was renowned for her resourcefulness and an unwavering determination to reclaim her rightful place on the throne. She devised a plan that was both audacious and incredibly risky. Knowing that she could not enter the palace openly, she resolved to bypass the watchful eyes of her brother's guards through a clandestine maneuver. According to the historical accounts, she entrusted her loyal servant, Apollodorus the Sicilian, with a singular task. She arranged to be smuggled into the palace, not as a queen, but as cargo. The precise details vary in ancient texts, sometimes described as a large sleeping bag, other times as a rolled carpet or rug. Regardless of the exact container, the essence of the act remained. Cleopatra concealed herself within it. In the stillness of the evening, Apollodorus carried this seemingly innocuous bundle through the palace gates, past the unsuspecting guards, and into the very apartments where Caesar resided. Once inside, the rug was unfurled, and from its depths Cleopatra emerged. This secret entry was a testament to her courage and her profound ingenuity. It underscored her conviction that direct appeal to Caesar was her only viable option. By bypassing the elaborate defences and the watchful eyes of her brother's faction, she demonstrated a daring spirit and a clear understanding of the political landscape. Her determination to meet Caesar face to face, despite the immense personal danger, highlighted her unwavering resolve to regain her throne. Then, the act was not merely a physical journey into the palace, but a powerful assertion of her will, setting the stage for one of history's most pivotal encounters. The unexpected appearance of Cleopatra before Julius Caesar, after her dramatic entry into the palace, profoundly altered the dynamics of the Alexandrian situation. Caesar, a man of immense political and military acumen, immediately grasped the significance of her presence. His initial purpose in Egypt had been the pursuit of Pompey, a task now rendered moot by the assassination orchestrated by the Alexandrian court. However, he now found himself embroiled in the internal affairs of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a situation he could not ignore. Caesar's primary strategic interest lay in the stability of Egypt. This fertile land was the granary of the Mediterranean, a vital source of grain for Rome, particularly for the sustenance of its growing population and its armies. A chaotic or hostile Egypt could jeopardize Rome's food supply and potentially fuel further unrest in the eastern Mediterranean. Therefore, ensuring a stable and, crucially, a pro-Roman government in Alexandria was paramount to his broader imperial designs. He understood that the ongoing power struggle between Cleopatra and her brother, Ptolemy XIII, threatened this stability. The assassination of Pompey had already demonstrated the Alexandrian court's capacity for independent action, and its disregard for Roman interest when it suited them. Caesar could not permit such unpredictability to continue. Having now heard Cleopatra's perspective directly, and likely impressed by her intelligence, ambition, and the sheer audacity of her arrival, Caesar determined that he would mediate the dispute himself. This decision was not born of altruism, but from a calculated assessment of Rome's best interests. He saw an opportunity to install a ruler, or co-rulers, who would be indebted to him and thus reliably pro-Roman. His intervention was therefore a strategic imperative. He summoned Ptolemy XIII and his advisors to the palace, intending to arbitrate the claims of both siblings. Caesar, as the representative of Roman power, asserted his authority to settle the succession crisis. He invoked the will of Ptolemy XII Auletes, Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII's father, which had stipulated that his children should rule jointly and had placed them under the protection of Rome. This provided him with a legitimate pretext for his involvement, allowing him to impose a solution that would ultimately serve Roman strategic goals and secure a stable, friendly Egypt under his influence. Caesar's decision to mediate the succession dispute, and particularly his apparent favour toward Cleopatra, was met with deep resentment by Ptolemy XIII's powerful regents. Pothinus the eunuch, who served as the young king's tutor and chief minister, along with Achillas, the commander of the Egyptian army, viewed Caesar's intervention as an intolerable affront to their authority and a direct threat to their control over the kingdom. They had orchestrated Cleopatra's exile and had profited immensely from their influence over Ptolemy XIII. A reinstated Cleopatra, backed by Rome, would dismantle their power base entirely. The will of Ptolemy XII Auletes, which Caesar cited as justification for his mediation, also contained a critical clause. It named the Roman people as guardians of his children and executors of his testament. This gave Caesar, as the leading Roman general, a seemingly legitimate basis for his involvement. However, Pothinus and Achillas saw this not as an act of arbitration, but as an imposition of Roman will, an unwelcome dictation of their internal affairs. Their indignation soon escalated into open hostility. Achillas, at the behest of Pothinus, ordered the Egyptian army to march on Alexandria. This force, consisting of some 20,000 men, was a formidable presence. Many of these soldiers were veterans who had served under Pompey's father and later under Pompey himself, and a significant portion of them were Roman mercenaries or Romanized provincials who had been absorbed into the Ptolemaic military structure. They were well trained and experienced, and their loyalty was firmly with Achillas and Pothinus, not with the Roman general who sought to diminish their leader's influence. The arrival of this massive army outside Alexandria dramatically changed the situation. Caesar, with his relatively small contingent of Roman legionaries, reportedly only around 4,000 men, a fraction of the Egyptian force, found himself in a precarious position. He had established his headquarters within the royal palace complex, a sprawling set of buildings situated near the great harbour. This complex, while grand, was not designed as a fortress against a determined army. The Egyptian forces, under Achillas, swiftly moved to besiege Caesar and Cleopatra within the palace. The city of Alexandria, with its narrow streets and densely packed buildings, quickly became a battleground. This sudden and violent turn of events marked the beginning of what would become known as the Alexandrian War, a protracted and perilous conflict for Caesar and his Roman legions. Trapped in the heart of a hostile city, fighting for their survival and for the fate of the Ptolemaic throne. Amidst the escalating conflict in Alexandria, an unintended and deeply regrettable consequence unfolded. The fighting, concentrated around the harbour area where Caesar and his forces were entrenched, brought the destructive elements of war into proximity with one of the ancient world's most treasured institutions, the Library of Alexandria. As the siege intensified, Caesar found his position vulnerable. The Egyptian fleet in the harbour posed a direct threat to his ships and supply lines, in a desperate tactical move to prevent the enemy from using their vessels against him. Caesar ordered the burning of the Egyptian ships. This was a common military strategy of the time, aimed at denying the enemy their naval advantage. However, the fires, once ignited, proved difficult to contain. Driven by the wind, the flames spread beyond the intended targets. The conflagration reached the nearby docks and warehouses, where vast quantities of papyrus scrolls were stored. These scrolls were not necessarily part of the main library building, but rather surplus copies, archives, or perhaps even books awaiting shipment or processing. The exact extent of the damage has been debated by historians for centuries. While the popular image often depicts the complete annihilation of the Great Library itself, historical accounts suggest a more nuanced reality. It is likely that a significant portion of the stored papyrus, potentially tens of thousands of scrolls, was indeed consumed by the fire. This catastrophic loss represented an irreplaceable destruction of knowledge, a sombre moment in the history of human intellect. This incident was not a deliberate act of cultural vandalism, but rather a tragic byproduct of a desperate military engagement. Caesar, a man of letters himself, would have understood the profound value of such a repository of knowledge. Yet, in the crucible of war, preservation often yields to the imperatives of survival. The burning of these scrolls serves as a stark reminder of the fragile nature of human achievements when confronted by the chaotic forces of conflict, a quiet tragedy unfolding amidst the clamour of battle. The Alexandrian War, a protracted and often desperate struggle for Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, eventually reached its pivotal turning point. For months, the Roman forces, significantly outnumbered, had been confined to a precarious foothold within the city, facing the relentless pressure of Ptolemy XIII's army. The conflict had seen periods of intense fighting, strategic maneuvers, and the tragic accidental destruction of invaluable scrolls. However, the tide began to shift with the arrival of Roman reinforcements. Legions dispatched from Syria and Asia Minor, under the command of Mithridates of Pergamon, arrived to bolster Caesar's beleaguered forces. This fresh influx of disciplined troops provided the crucial numerical and tactical advantage that Caesar had desperately needed. With these reinforcements, Caesar was able to break out of his besieged position in Alexandria. A decisive engagement soon followed, taking the war beyond the city's narrow streets and into the broader landscape of the Nile Delta. The combined Roman and Allied forces met Ptolemy XIII's army in a pitched battle, likely near the Canopic branch of the Nile. The battle was fierce, but the superior training and leadership of the Roman legions, now effectively supported, proved overwhelming. Ptolemy XIII's forces were routed, suffering heavy casualties. In the ensuing chaos of the defeat, the young pharaoh attempted to flee. Accounts indicate that as he sought to escape the pursuing Roman soldiers, his boat capsized in the turbulent waters of the Nile. Weighted down by his golden armour, a symbol of his royal status, Ptolemy XIII perished in the river. His death marked the definitive end of the Alexandrian War, and the immediate threat to Cleopatra's claim to the throne. With her brother and rival removed, and the Roman legions having secured victory, Cleopatra's position as the sole ruler of Egypt, with the backing of Julius Caesar, was now firmly established. This moment represented a profound triumph, born from audacity and secured by Roman military might. The path ahead, however, remained intricately linked to Rome's enduring influence. With Ptolemy XIII's demise and the Alexandrian War concluded, Cleopatra's return to the throne was assured. Yet, the conventions of Ptolemaic succession and Roman political expediency still required a co-ruler. The solution presented itself in her youngest surviving brother, Ptolemy XIV. Julius Caesar, ever the pragmatist, understood the need for stability in Egypt. While Cleopatra's personal connection with him was undeniable, he also recognized the importance of adhering to the established norms of the Ptolemaic dynasty, which often mandated a male co-ruler. Ptolemy XIV, a boy of approximately 12 years old at the time, was chosen for this role. Unlike his older brother, Ptolemy XIV posed no immediate threat to Cleopatra's authority. He was too young to command an army or independently challenge her rule, making him a far more compliant and manageable figurehead. This arrangement allowed Cleopatra to re-establish her queenship with a semblance of traditional legitimacy, while in practice consolidating her own power. The young Ptolemy XIV served primarily as a formal partner, fulfilling the dynastic requirement without exerting any real influence on state affairs. Cleopatra, with Caesar's implicit backing, effectively governed Egypt alone. Her return to power was not merely a restoration, it was a reassertion of her will and capabilities. The period following the war saw Cleopatra begin to rebuild Egypt's internal stability and mend the fractures caused by the recent conflict. She oversaw the critical grain shipments to Rome, a gesture of goodwill and a practical necessity for maintaining Roman favour. Her focus was on ensuring the prosperity of Egypt, an understanding that a stable and wealthy kingdom was essential for her own security and for sustaining the crucial relationship with the Roman Republic. The partnership with Ptolemy XIV, therefore, was a strategic necessity rather than a true sharing of power. It allowed Cleopatra to navigate the intricate political landscape of both Egypt and Rome, presenting a traditional front while exercising singular authority. This period marked the beginning of her unchallenged rule within Egypt, albeit under the ever-present shadow of Roman influence and the personal connection she had forged with Julius Caesar. Her reign would now unfold with a renewed sense of purpose, carefully balancing Egyptian sovereignty with Roman demands. The alliance between Cleopatra and Julius Caesar extended far beyond mere political convenience. It evolved into a profound and multifaceted relationship, intertwining personal attraction with their shared strategic ambitions. Their initial encounter, marked by Cleopatra's daring entrance into Caesar's quarters, had set a precedent for a dynamic built on mutual respect for intellect and boldness. Caesar, a seasoned Roman general and statesman, was captivated by Cleopatra's intelligence, her linguistic prowess, and her deep understanding of governance. She was not merely a beautiful queen, but a formidable political mind, capable of engaging him on an equal footing. For Cleopatra, Caesar represented the ultimate guarantor of her throne and the future of Egypt. His power was unparalleled, and his favour was the most vital asset for the Ptolemaic dynasty's survival. Their connection deepened during the months Caesar remained in Egypt after the Alexandrian War. They spent considerable time together, discussing philosophy, strategy, and the intricacies of their respective worlds. This period was marked by a blend of intellectual companionship and undeniable personal chemistry. Cleopatra's ability to converse in Greek, a language Caesar admired, further facilitated their bond, allowing for discussions that transcended typical diplomatic exchanges. The relationship was at its core a strategic partnership disguised by genuine affection. Cleopatra understood that aligning herself with Caesar secured Egypt's position as a vital Roman ally rather than a conquered province. Caesar, in turn, found in Cleopatra a valuable and intelligent partner, whose kingdom provided essential resources, particularly grain. For Rome, he also found a stimulating companion in a world often devoid of intellectual equals. Their union was not without its complexities. Caesar was a married man, and Roman law prohibited him from marrying a foreign queen. Yet their bond was strong enough to lead to the birth of a child, Ptolemy Caesar, later known as Caesarion. This child symbolized the profound nature of their connection, a bridge between two powerful figures and two ancient civilizations. The relationship between Cleopatra and Caesar was a delicate balance of intertwined destinies, each seeking to leverage the other's power and influence for their own grand designs. It was a union that shaped the immediate future of Egypt and profoundly impacted the trajectory of Roman politics, demonstrating how personal connections could profoundly alter the course of history. In the early summer of 47 BCE, within the opulent confines of the Alexandrian palace, Cleopatra gave birth to a son. This child, named Ptolemy Caesar, would come to be known more commonly by his diminutive Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar. His arrival marked a moment of immense political significance, far beyond the typical joy of royal childbirth. Caesarion represented a tangible manifestation of the profound connection between Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. For Cleopatra, this son was a potential heir who could secure the future of the Ptolemaic dynasty, reinforcing her claim to the throne and ensuring the continued independence of Egypt under Roman protection. He was not merely a child of love, but a strategic asset, embodying the powerful alliance she had forged. The implications for Rome were equally significant, so though considerably more unsettling for many within the Roman Republic. Caesarion was proclaimed by Cleopatra as the son of Julius Caesar, a claim that Caesar himself tacitly acknowledged, though he could not formally do so given Roman laws against marriage with foreign queens. The very existence of Caesarion presented a dynastic challenge to the established order in Rome. Julius Caesar had no legitimate male heir in Rome at this time, and the idea of a half-Egyptian son born to a foreign monarch, potentially inheriting Caesar's immense influence, was deeply disquieting to many Roman senators and citizens. It raised fears of a Hellenistic monarchy being imposed upon the Republic, a concept anathema to traditional Roman values. The child therefore became a silent yet potent, a symbol of a potential future where Roman power might be inextricably linked with Egyptian royalty. Cleopatra, with characteristic foresight, understood the power inherent in Caesarion's birth. She ensured his legitimacy within the Egyptian context, presenting him as a divine child, a blend of Egyptian pharaonic tradition and Roman imperial lineage. This act further solidified her position as a powerful and astute ruler, capable of maneuvering within both Egyptian and Roman spheres of influence. Though a mere infant, Caesarion's presence in Alexandria cast a long shadow over the political landscapes of both Egypt and Rome. He was a living testament to the unprecedented relationship between Cleopatra and Caesar, a potential bridge between two worlds, and a source of both hope for Cleopatra and anxiety for those who sought to preserve the Roman Republic's ancient traditions. His birth quietly but firmly shifted the geopolitical currents of the Mediterranean. Following Caesar's departure from Egypt, Cleopatra eventually made her way to Rome, not once but on at least two significant occasions, bringing with her their young son Caesarion. Her first visit likely occurred in 46 BCE, and she remained in the city for an extended period, residing in Caesar's private villa across the Tiber River, a place of considerable luxury and privacy. Her presence in the heart of the Roman world was a spectacle and a source of considerable fascination and discomfort for the Roman elite. Cleopatra arrived not as a supplicant, but as a sovereign queen accompanied by a lavish retinue, and her style and demeanour, distinctly Egyptian and Hellenistic, stood in stark contrast to the conservative Roman aristocratic traditions. She was a woman of immense charm and intellect, fluent in many languages, and possessed a regal bearing that commanded attention. Julius Caesar, by all accounts, treated her with the utmost respect and honour. He proudly displayed her golden statue in the Temple of Venus Genetrix, a powerful symbol of his personal and political connection to the Egyptian queen. This public veneration of a foreign monarch, particularly one who was openly acknowledged as the mother of his son, caused considerable unease among the Roman senatorial class. The Roman aristocracy, deeply ingrained in their republican ideals, viewed Cleopatra with a mixture of awe, suspicion, and disdain. Her perceived influence over Caesar fueled rumours and anxieties. Many feared that Caesar, already consolidating unprecedented power, might be swayed by Cleopatra to adopt an Eastern, monarchical style of rule, replacing the Republic with a Hellenistic-style kingdom. The idea of Rome being led by a ruler with a foreign queen and a foreign-born heir was an affront to their deeply held values. Cicero, the renowned orator, expressed his dislike for her with a thinly veiled contempt, finding her arrogance and perceived exoticism distasteful. Others whispered about her seductive powers and the potential threat she posed to Roman identity and tradition. Despite these undercurrents of disapproval, Cleopatra maintained her dignified presence, navigating the complex social and political landscape of Rome with a quiet confidence. She was a guest of the most powerful man in Rome, and her position was, for a time, unassailable. Her stay in Rome highlighted the growing tensions between Caesar's personal desires and the deeply entrenched conservatism of the Roman Republic. The Ides of March, 44 BCE, brought an abrupt and violent end to the life of Gaius Julius Caesar, profoundly altering the trajectory of Roman history and by extension the destiny of Cleopatra. On that fateful day, Caesar arrived at the theatre of Pompey, where the Senate was convening. He was met not with the usual deference, but with a sudden, coordinated assault by a group of senators, including figures he had pardoned and promoted. They saw themselves as liberators, acting to save the Roman Republic from what they perceived as Caesar's tyrannical ambitions. The attack was swift and brutal. Caesar was stabbed multiple times, falling at the foot of a statue of his former rival, Pompey the Great. The immediate aftermath was chaos and disbelief. The senators, their hands stained with blood, initially proclaimed their deed as a righteous act of freedom, but the Roman populace, particularly those who had benefited from Caesar's reforms and generosity, reacted with shock and outrage. The city plunged into a period of deep uncertainty and political instability. For Cleopatra, still residing in Caesar's villa across the Tiber with Caesarion, the news of the assassination must have arrived with a devastating suddenness. The man who had been her protector, her lover, and the guarantor of her throne was gone. His death instantly dissolved the foundation of her power in Rome and shattered the strategic alliance that had brought stability to Egypt. The golden statue of her in the Temple of Venus Genetrix, a symbol of her elevated status, now seemed a provocative relic of a vanished order. Her position in Rome became immediately precarious. Without Caesar's direct patronage, she was no longer an honoured guest, but a foreign queen with a controversial child, now vulnerable to the shifting tides of Roman politics. The very senators who had resented her presence now had no reason to tolerate it. The assassins, and many others in Rome, would have viewed Caesarion as a potential dynastic threat, a living reminder of Caesar's perceived monarchical aspirations. Cleopatra understood the gravity of the situation with remarkable clarity. Her safety and that of her son were paramount. The moment required a swift and decisive response. The grand ambitions she might have harboured for Caesarion's future in Rome and for Egypt's role in a Caesar-led empire evaporated with Caesar's last breath. Her immediate priority shifted from influence to survival. With Julius Caesar's assassination, Cleopatra's immediate concern became the preservation of her own life and that of her son, Caesarion. Rome was no longer a safe harbour. Its political landscape had fractured into a dangerous and unpredictable struggle for power. Remaining in the city would have exposed her to the machinations of Caesar's enemies and the volatile emotions of the populace. Thus, with a calculated swiftness, Cleopatra departed Rome, taking Caesarion with her, and returned to the relative security of Egypt. Upon her arrival back in Alexandria, Cleopatra found herself once again navigating the intricate and often ruthless dynamics of Ptolemaic succession. At this time she nominally co-ruled with her younger brother Ptolemy XIV, a figure whose existence presented a potential complication to her long-term plans. While he was a minor and held little actual power, his presence as a male co-ruler, even if merely titular, could theoretically be exploited by rivals or by Roman factions seeking to destabilize her reign. It is recorded that Ptolemy XIV died later that same year, 44 BCE, shortly after Cleopatra's return. Ancient sources such as Josephus explicitly state that he was poisoned by Cleopatra, while direct, irrefutable evidence of her hand in his death is not available in the modern sense. The timing and the circumstances surrounding his demise strongly suggest a deliberate act. The removal of Ptolemy XIV served a clear and strategic purpose for Cleopatra. With her last remaining brother eliminated, the path was cleared for Caesarion to be elevated as her co-ruler. This act secured Caesarion's position as the legitimate heir to the Ptolemaic throne, not just as Cleopatra's son, but as her officially recognised partner in kingship. By making Caesarion her co-regent, Cleopatra formally solidified the dynastic link to Julius Caesar, even in his absence, and underscored the legitimacy of her own rule through her son. This consolidation of power marked a critical juncture. Cleopatra was now the undisputed sovereign of Egypt, ruling alongside her young son, free from the constraints of a co-ruling sibling. This strategic move allowed her to focus entirely on strengthening Egypt's position and preparing for the inevitable future interactions with the volatile and powerful Roman Republic, now embroiled in civil war. The political vacuum left by Caesar's death initiated a period of intense and destructive civil war that would engulf the Roman world for more than a decade. Initially, two main factions emerged. On one side were the self-proclaimed liberators, led by Brutus and Cassius, the principal assassins of Caesar, who claimed to be defending the Republic from tyranny. On the other side stood the Caesarians, initially a disparate group of Caesar's former generals and allies, who sought to avenge his death and maintain his legacy. Out of the Caesarian faction, a powerful triumvirate eventually formed, consisting of Marcus Antonius, he is known as Mark Antony, Caesar's most prominent general and a loyal supporter, Gaius Octavius, Caesar's adopted son and designated heir, later known as Octavian, and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, another of Caesar's generals. These three men, through the Lex Titia, formally constituted the second triumvirate, granted immense power to restore order and punish Caesar's murderers. Their primary objective became the elimination of Brutus and Cassius and their Republican forces. As these colossal Roman powers clashed across the Mediterranean, Cleopatra, now firmly in control of Egypt, found herself in a precarious yet potentially advantageous position. Egypt possessed immense wealth, vast grain supplies, and a significant navy, resources that any Roman faction would covet. However, an openly siding with one group too early carried the risk of alienating the others, potentially inviting their wrath and the invasion of her kingdom. Cleopatra's strategy during this tumultuous period was one of cautious neutrality. She avoided committing Egypt's full resources to either side, instead offering limited and carefully measured support when absolutely necessary. She understood that Egypt's survival depended on its ability to navigate the shifting sands of Roman politics without becoming a direct casualty of their internal struggles. Her focus remained on preserving her kingdom's independence and her own dynasty, while quietly observing the unfolding events. This period of Roman internal conflict, therefore, became a time of careful manoeuvring for Cleopatra. She watched as the battles raged, and particularly the pivotal engagement at Philippi in 42 BCE, which saw the defeat and deaths of Brutus and Cassius. With the liberators vanquished, the Roman world was effectively divided between the triumvirs, and a new phase of interaction with Egypt was soon to begin. Following the decisive victory at Philippi, the Roman world was redivided amongst the triumvirs. Mark Antony, as the most senior and militarily experienced of the three, was assigned the eastern provinces. This vast territory encompassed lands stretching from Greece to Syria, including the client kingdoms and allied states that formed a crucial buffer against the Parthian Empire, Rome's perennial eastern rival. Antony's immediate task was to secure these provinces, extract tribute, and raise funds and troops for future campaigns, particularly against Parthia. Egypt, with its immense wealth, agricultural bounty, and strategic location, was of paramount importance to Antony's plans. Although Cleopatra had maintained a careful neutrality during the recent civil wars, her kingdom's resources were still largely untapped by the triumvirs. Antony needed access to these resources, and he needed to ensure Egypt's loyalty to the new Roman order. Therefore, in 41 BCE, from his headquarters in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, Antony dispatched a summons to Cleopatra. This was not a mere invitation. It was a directive from a Roman master to a client queen. The official reason for the summons was to account for her perceived lack of support during the civil war, particularly her failure to send sufficient aid to the triumvirs. However, the underlying purpose was undeniably political and financial. One Antony sought to assess Cleopatra's allegiance, to secure Egyptian wealth for his military chest, and to solidify Roman control over this vital kingdom. For Cleopatra, the summons represented both a challenge and an opportunity. While it carried the implicit threat of Roman displeasure, it also offered a direct channel to one of the most powerful men in Rome. She understood the immense stakes involved. Her previous relationship with Julius Caesar had taught her the importance of personal diplomacy with Roman leaders. She knew that simply complying with the summons was not enough. She needed to make a profound impression, one that would secure Egypt's position and her own. This meeting in Tarsus, therefore, was not merely a social encounter, but a crucial diplomatic engagement. For Antony, it was about consolidating Roman power and securing vital resources for his eastern ambitions. For Cleopatra, it was about safeguarding her dynasty, preserving her kingdom's precarious autonomy, and navigating the unpredictable currents of Roman imperial will. The stage was set for an encounter that would profoundly shape the destinies of both individuals and the future of the Roman world. When Cleopatra received Antony's summons to Tarsus, she understood that a conventional arrival would not suffice. Her past experiences, particularly her clandestine meeting with Julius Caesar, had demonstrated the power of a dramatic entrance. For Antony, she orchestrated a spectacle designed to underscore her wealth, her allure and her divine status, carefully crafting an image that would resonate with a Roman general accustomed to grandeur yet perhaps unprepared for such deliberate artistry. She chose to arrive by water, sailing up the Cydnus River. Her vessel was not merely a boat but a gilded barge, its stern adorned with gold, its sails dyed a rich purple, billowing with the wind. The oars, fashioned from silver, moved in rhythmic precision, keeping time to the accompanying music of flutes, pipes, and lyres. The air around the barge was heavy with the scent of burning perfumes, wafting from censers on deck and carried by the gentle breeze to the river banks. Cleopatra herself was positioned beneath a canopy of cloth of gold, arranged to resemble the goddess Aphrodite, reclining in an attitude of serene beauty. Around her, her most beautiful attendants were dressed as Nereids and Graces, ministering to her with silent deference. Young boys, costumed as Cupids, fanned her and poured libations. This carefully constructed tableau was not merely for show, it was a profound statement. By associating herself with Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility, Cleopatra subtly invoked her own divine lineage and sought to cast a spell of enchantment over her audience, particularly Antony. As the barge slowly made its way upstream, the news of its approach spread through Tarsus. The city's inhabitants, along with Antony's soldiers, abandoned their daily tasks and crowded the riverbanks and rooftops, eager to witness the spectacle. Antony himself, initially waiting in the forum, found his audience dwindling as the entire city flocked to the river. He was left in solitude, a subtle yet potent demonstration of Cleopatra's immediate command over public attention. Cleopatra's choice to appear as Aphrodite was a calculated move. For Romans, Aphrodite, or Venus, was the divine ancestress of the Julian family, a connection that Julius Caesar had often emphasized. By adopting this persona, Cleopatra subtly invoked her past relationship with Caesar and projected an image of irresistible charm and powerful lineage. Her theatrical arrival was not an act of frivolous display, but a deliberate exercise in soft power, designed to disarm, to impress, and to establish a unique position in the mind of Mark Antony before any words were even exchanged. The grandeur of her entrance was intended to convey that she was not merely a suppliant queen, but a sovereign of immense prestige and captivating presence. Following her impactful arrival, Cleopatra engaged with Mark Antony in Tarsus, initiating a relationship that would profoundly shape the course of both their lives and the history of the Roman world. The initial encounters were characterized by lavish banquets and prolonged discussions, during which a complex interplay of personal attraction and strategic necessity began to unfold. Antony, a man of considerable charisma and a veteran of numerous campaigns, was accustomed to power and influence. Yet Cleopatra presented a unique challenge and appeal. Her intellectual prowess, her command of multiple languages, and her astute understanding of politics and diplomacy were evident. Beyond her carefully cultivated allure, whereas she possessed a sharp mind that could engage him on an equal footing, a quality that set her apart from many others he had encountered. For Antony, who was now a dominant figure in the eastern Roman provinces, an alliance with Egypt offered invaluable resources. His ambitious plans for a Parthian campaign, aimed at avenging a previous Roman defeat, required substantial funding, provisions, and logistical support. Egypt, with its immense agricultural wealth and vast treasury, was the richest kingdom in the Mediterranean, a prize he could not afford to overlook. Cleopatra, in turn, recognized in Antony a powerful protector and a potential guarantor of her kingdom's security. The Roman civil wars had left Egypt in a precarious position, vulnerable to annexation by any ambitious Roman general. Her previous alliance with Julius Caesar had secured her throne, but his assassination had rendered that protection void. Antony, as one of the triumvirs, held immense authority. By aligning herself with him, she sought to shield Egypt from Roman encroachment and ensure the continued independence of the Ptolemaic dynasty. She understood that Roman protection came at a price, and she was prepared to pay it, not merely in material wealth, but also in personal commitment. Their relationship swiftly evolved beyond a purely political arrangement. The lavish banquets and shared intellectual discourse fostered a deep personal connection. Antony found himself captivated by Cleopatra's intellect, her wit, and her ability to entertain and challenge him. Cleopatra, for her part, likely saw in Antony a powerful and decisive leader, and a man capable of safeguarding her kingdom, and perhaps even elevating her status further on the international stage. Thus, a formidable alliance was forged, rooted in a blend of mutual attraction and clear strategic advantages. Antony gained access to Egypt's vast resources, crucial for his military and political objectives in the east. Cleopatra secured the crucial Roman protection necessary for the survival of her kingdom and her dynasty. Their union was not simply a romantic entanglement, but a calculated political partnership, designed to serve their respective ambitions in a rapidly changing world. Following their initial meeting and the establishment of their alliance, Antony spent the winter of 41 to 40 BCE in Alexandria, a period marked by both opulent living and significant strategic discussions. This time allowed their partnership to deepen, extending beyond mere political expediency into a shared intellectual and cultural space. Alexandria, with its famed library and museum, was a vibrant centre of learning and sophisticated Hellenistic culture. Cleopatra, a multilingual monarch deeply immersed in this environment, served as an ideal host. Their days were filled with banquets, theatrical performances, and philosophical debates. They were known to engage in intellectual pursuits, exploring Greek literature, science, and history. Antony, though a Roman, possessed a keen appreciation for Hellenistic culture, and in Cleopatra he found a companion who could not only match his political ambition but also stimulate his mind. They reportedly formed a drinking club, the Inimitable Livers, which suggests a relaxed yet intellectually stimulating atmosphere, far removed from the austere Roman ideal. Beyond the luxurious facade, this period in Alexandria was crucial for solidifying their shared vision for the Eastern Mediterranean. Cleopatra, as a descendant of the Ptolemies, harboured aspirations for a revitalised Hellenistic empire with Egypt at its heart. She envisioned a powerful, independent East, capable of standing as a counterweight to Rome's growing dominance. Antony, having been entrusted with the administration of the Roman East, found common ground in this ambition. He recognised the potential for a stable and prosperous Eastern bloc, which could serve as a formidable base for his own power and influence within the Roman triumvirate. Their discussions likely centred on the reorganisation of Eastern territories, the establishment of loyal client kingdoms, and the strategic deployment of resources. Cleopatra's intimate knowledge of the region, its rulers, and its complex political landscape proved invaluable to Antony's planning. Together they began to lay the groundwork for a future where Alexandria, rather than Rome, might become the true centre of the Hellenistic world. This shared vision, born amidst the splendour of the Ptolemaic court, underscored the profound depth of their alliance, intertwining personal connection with grand geopolitical ambitions. The alliance between Cleopatra and Mark Antony deepened not only through shared political ambition and intellectual camaraderie, but also through the arrival of children, further weaving their destinies together. In 40 BCE, following Antony's departure from Alexandria, Cleopatra gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. These children were named Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene II. The naming of the twins was itself a statement of their parents' grand designs. Alexander, a name evoking the great conqueror from whom the Ptolemaic dynasty descended, was paired with Helios, the Greek god of the sun, signifying a radiant and expansive future. Cleopatra, named after her mother, was given the epithet Selene, the Greek goddess of the moon, suggesting a complementary, equally powerful presence. These names were not merely personal choices, they were carefully chosen symbols of a new Hellenistic order, a dual monarchy of solar and lunar power that would extend its influence across the East. Several years later, in 36 BCE, a third child, another son, was born to Cleopatra and Antony. He was named Ptolemy Philadelphus. The name Ptolemy, common within the Egyptian royal line, was combined with Philadelphus, meaning sibling-loving, a significant epithet used by earlier Ptolemaic rulers to denote familial devotion and by extension stability within the dynasty. This third child solidified the dynastic aspirations of Cleopatra and Antony. These three children served as living embodiments of the bond between Cleopatra and Antony, transforming a strategic alliance into a deeply personal and dynastic union. With Caesarion, her son by Julius Caesar, Cleopatra now had 4 royal children, each representing a facet of her ambition to secure the future of Egypt and expand its influence. For Antony, these children represented a new lineage, a connection to the ancient and rich traditions of the East, and a potential counterweight to the Roman political landscape dominated by Octavian. The births of Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene II, and Ptolemy Philadelphus were not merely private family events. They were public declarations, reinforcing the legitimacy and permanence of Cleopatra and Antony's partnership. Each birth further cemented their shared vision for a powerful Hellenistic East, a vision that would increasingly clash with the Roman Republic's own ambitions and eventually draw the full attention of Octavian. These children were raised within the lavish and intellectually stimulating environment of the Alexandrian court, destined, their parents hoped, to inherit a vast and prosperous empire. In 34 BCE, a pivotal event unfolded in Alexandria, known to history as the Donations of Alexandria. This grand public ceremony was orchestrated by Mark Antony and Cleopatra, serving as a powerful and provocative declaration of their imperial ambitions and their vision for the Hellenistic East. It was not merely a local celebration, but a deliberate challenge to the established order of the Roman world. The ceremony itself was designed for maximum impact and theatricality. Antony, dressed in the garb of the god Dionysus, and Cleopatra, arrayed as the goddess Isis, sat on golden thrones upon a silver platform. Beside them sat their children, similarly adorned in royal attire, each positioned to signify their future roles. Before a vast crowd of Alexandrians and numerous foreign dignitaries, Antony made a series of pronouncements that irrevocably altered the geopolitical landscape and ignited fury in Rome. First, Antony formally recognized Caesarion, Cleopatra's son by Julius Caesar, as Caesar's true heir, a direct and audacious slight against Octavian, who had built his power upon his adoption as Caesar's son. Caesarion was proclaimed King of Kings and co-ruler with Cleopatra. Next, Antony publicly declared Cleopatra as Queen of Kings, a title that elevated her status beyond that of a mere client ruler and affirmed her as a sovereign power. He then proceeded to distribute vast territories, many of which were under Roman control or influence, to their children. Alexander Helios was proclaimed King of Armenia, Media, Parthia, and all the lands from the Euphrates to the Indus. These were territories either recently conquered by Antony or still held by Rome's great eastern rival Parthia, indicating a grand yet perhaps premature claim. Cleopatra Selene II was declared Queen of Cyrenaica and Libya, and the youngest son, Ptolemy Philadelphus, was granted Syria, Cilicia, and Phoenicia. These proclamations were far more than symbolic gestures. They represented a fundamental reordering of the Eastern Roman provinces, transferring vast swathes of Roman-administered land into the hands of Cleopatra's children, thereby diminishing Roman authority and establishing a new Hellenistic empire under the dominion of Alexandria. The news of the donations of Alexandria reached Rome with predictable and profound outrage. Octavian, in particular, was seized upon these declarations as irrefutable evidence of Antony's betrayal of Roman interests and his complete subjugation to Cleopatra. The distribution of Roman territories to foreign monarchs, particularly to children, was perceived as an act of treason, a deliberate affront to Roman pride and a direct threat to its imperial integrity. This audacious public spectacle intensified the already simmering tensions between Antony and Octavian, pushing the two most powerful men in the Roman world inexorably towards a final, devastating confrontation. The audacious pronouncements made during the donations of Alexandria provided Octavian with precisely the ammunition he needed. He embarked upon a meticulously planned and relentlessly executed propaganda campaign designed to dismantle Antony's reputation and demonize Cleopatra in the eyes of the Roman populace. This campaign was a masterful exercise in psychological warfare, carefully crafted to tap into deep-seated Roman prejudices and fears. Octavian's strategy centered on portraying Cleopatra not as a legitimate sovereign or a brilliant political strategist, but as an exotic and dangerous Eastern temptress. She was depicted as a seductive sorceress, a foreign queen using her wiles to corrupt a noble Roman general. Pamphlets and public speeches circulated throughout Rome, painting her as a luxurious decadent figure bent on undermining Roman morality and subjugating its leaders. The image of Cleopatra as a threat to Roman virtue and stability was relentlessly promoted, playing upon xenophobic sentiments and traditional Roman anxieties about powerful foreign women. Mark Antony, in turn, was systematically presented as a man utterly enthralled and emasculated by this foreign queen. Octavian's narrative portrayed him not as a co-ruler of the Roman world, but as a weakened, morally compromised figure entirely under Cleopatra's sway. He was depicted as having abandoned his Roman duties, his Roman wife Octavia, who was Octavian's sister, and his Roman heritage, all for the sake of an illicit, un-Roman passion. The donations of Alexandria were held up as conclusive proof of Antony's complete capitulation to Cleopatra's will, demonstrating his readiness to carve up Roman territory for her and their children. The propaganda machine also heavily emphasized the perceived threat to Rome itself, though Octavian warned that Cleopatra, through Antony, intended to move the capital of the Roman Empire from Rome to Alexandria. This idea, deeply offensive to Roman pride, fueled fears of a foreign conquest and the complete subjugation of Roman identity. The very essence of Roman civilization, its laws, its customs, its republican ideals, were presented as being at risk from this Eastern contamination. This sustained campaign was remarkably effective. It skillfully transformed a complex political struggle into a moral crusade, framing the impending conflict not as a civil war between two Roman leaders, but as a defensive war against an external, decadent and dangerous enemy. By skillfully manipulating public opinion, Octavian successfully isolated Antony and cast Cleopatra as the ultimate antagonist, paving the way for the eventual declaration of war. The relationship between Mark Antony and Octavian, already strained by years of uneasy power sharing, began to fracture irrevocably in the wake of the donations of Alexandria. This public declaration, coupled with Octavian's relentless propaganda, pushed the two triumvirs towards an unavoidable confrontation. The tenuous balance of power that had characterized their alliance, even with its underlying tensions, was now completely eroded. Octavian, having successfully inflamed Roman public opinion against Antony and Cleopatra, continued to gather support within Italy. He presented himself as the defender of Roman tradition and integrity, positioning Antony as a traitor who had abandoned his Roman identity for an Eastern queen. The perceived influence of Cleopatra on Antony became a central point of contention. Romans, particularly those in the Senate, grew increasingly alarmed by reports of Antony's life in Alexandria, the lavish ceremonies, and the distribution of Roman-held lands to Cleopatra's children. This was seen as a profound betrayal of Roman interests and a direct challenge to the Republic's authority. The donations, in particular, were viewed as an act of profound disrespect towards Rome. Granting vast swathes of territory, some of which were under Roman control or influence, to foreign rulers and their offspring, was an affront that could not be easily forgiven. Recognizing Caesarion as Caesar's legitimate heir was another direct provocation, as it threatened Octavian's own claim to be Caesar's sole successor and the rightful inheritor of his legacy. Each of these actions, whether individually or in combination, served to deepen the chasm between the two most powerful men in Rome. Attempts at reconciliation, if they were even seriously considered by either side, became increasingly futile. The political climate in Rome had become too polarized, and the personal animosity between Octavian and Antony had intensified beyond repair. Antony, for his part, remained committed to his vision of a Hellenistic East, supported by Cleopatra's resources and strategic acumen. He seemed to underestimate the potency of Octavian's propaganda and the depth of the resentment it was fostering in Italy. As the rhetoric escalated, the lines of conflict became starkly drawn. Octavian systematically stripped Antony of his remaining political influence in Rome, culminating in the unprecedented act of seizing Antony's will from the Vestal Virgins, revealing its contents to the Senate and the Roman people. The will allegedly confirmed Antony's desire to be buried in Alexandria alongside Cleopatra, and bequeathed significant Roman territories to their children. This final act of public humiliation solidified the image of Antony as a foreign puppet and sealed the inevitability of war. The stage was now set for the final, decisive confrontation for control of the Roman world. With the political machinations reaching a fever pitch, Octavian orchestrated a pivotal move in Rome. In 32 BCE, a formal declaration of war was issued by the Roman Senate. However, this declaration was not directed at Mark Antony, a fellow Roman citizen and triumvir, but rather at Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt. This was a calculated and deeply strategic maneuver on Octavian's part, designed to achieve several critical objectives. By framing the conflict as a war against a foreign queen, Octavian skillfully avoided the appearance of initiating another devastating Roman civil war. The memory of the recent civil conflicts, which had torn the Republic apart for decades, was still fresh and deeply feared by the Roman populace. Directly declaring war on Antony would have inevitably invoked these painful memories and potentially alienated many Romans who might have been reluctant to take up arms against another Roman. Instead, Octavian presented the struggle as a defense of Roman values and sovereignty against an external exotic threat, and Cleopatra was portrayed as an ambitious foreign ruler who sought to undermine Rome through her influence over Antony. This narrative allowed Octavian to rally support by appealing to a sense of national unity and a desire to protect Roman traditions from perceived Eastern corruption. Antony was thus depicted not as an enemy to be fought, but as a Roman who had fallen under the spell of a dangerous foreign power, effectively making him an accessory to Cleopatra's supposed aggression. This strategic framing also allowed Octavian to justify his actions without directly challenging the legitimacy of Antony's imperium or command, which still held legal standing. By declaring war on Cleopatra, he could mobilize Roman forces and resources against her, with Antony's forces implicitly becoming targets as they were aligned with the declared enemy. It transformed what was fundamentally a power struggle between two Roman leaders into a seemingly justifiable foreign war. Furthermore, this declaration provided a powerful psychological advantage. It reinforced the propaganda narrative that Cleopatra was the true enemy, the Oriental temptress who had seduced a great Roman general and turned him against his own people. This portrayal served to dehumanize Cleopatra in the eyes of the Roman public and legitimize any future actions taken against her and her kingdom. The Roman people were called upon to make an oath of loyalty, not to Octavian personally, but to the Roman state and its defense against this perceived foreign threat. This oath bound many to Octavian's cause, solidifying his position as the champion of Rome and setting the stage for the final, inevitable conflict. The decisive moment arrived on September 2nd, 31 BCE, off the western coast of Greece, in the Ionian Sea, near the promontory of Actium. Here, the vast fleets of Mark Antony and Cleopatra confronted the forces of Octavian. Antony's fleet, though formidable in number, suffered from various disadvantages, including illness among the crews and a lack of experienced sailors, many having been pressed into service. Octavian's admiral, Marcus Agrippa, a highly skilled naval commander, had already demonstrated his tactical prowess in earlier skirmishes. The battle commenced with a tense standoff, followed by a series of engagements where the larger, less maneuverable ships of Antony and Cleopatra struggled against Agrippa's more agile vessels. A critical strategic blunder was made by Antony's side, as their ships were heavily laden with treasure, and he intended for their escape if the battle turned against them, rather than being optimized purely for combat. This decision, perhaps born of a desperate contingency plan, ultimately hampered their fighting effectiveness. As the battle progressed, confusion began to spread through Antony's ranks. The exact sequence of events remains debated by historians, but at a crucial juncture, Cleopatra's squadron, numbering around 60 ships, unexpectedly hoisted sail and broke through the lines, heading south, seemingly abandoning the fray. Her departure was not a tactical retreat in the traditional sense, but rather an attempt to escape the encirclement and preserve her ships and the vast treasury they carried. Seeing Cleopatra's standard withdrawing, and perhaps misinterpreting her actions as a complete collapse or a prearranged signal, Mark Antony himself made the fateful decision to follow her. He transferred to a swift quinquereme and, with a small escort, broke through the embattled lines to pursue Cleopatra's departing fleet. His sudden departure left his remaining forces leaderless and demoralized. The sight of their commander abandoning the battle proved devastating for the morale of Antony's men. What had been a hard-fought engagement quickly devolved into a rout. Many of Antony's ships, now without direction or hope, either surrendered or were destroyed. The Battle of Actium was not a prolonged, decisive naval engagement in the conventional sense, but rather a strategic unravelling for Antony and Cleopatra, culminating in their retreat and the effective destruction of their combined naval power. This moment marked a profound turning point, unsealing the fate of their cause and signalling the imminent triumph of Octavian. The immediate aftermath of the Battle of Actium brought a crushing wave of despair to Antony and Cleopatra. As their ships, or what remained of them, sailed south towards Egypt, a palpable sense of defeat permeated their dwindling forces. The strategic withdrawal from Actium, intended to preserve assets, was widely perceived as an outright abandonment of the fight, a catastrophic failure of leadership that shattered the morale of their remaining legions and allies. Word of the rout at Actium spread rapidly across the Roman East. The news, relayed by messengers and defectors, confirmed the complete reversal of fortune. Antony's legions, left behind in Greece, soon found themselves isolated and vulnerable. Without their general, and with the overwhelming presence of Octavian's victorious army, desertions began almost immediately. Entire units, seeing the futility of continued resistance, began to switch allegiance to Octavian. Commanders who had once been loyal to Antony, recognizing the inevitable shift in power, made their own calculations for survival, leading to a cascade of defections. The once grand alliance that Antony and Cleopatra had painstakingly built began to unravel with alarming speed. Client kings and regional governors, who had pledged their support, now swiftly distanced themselves from the losing side. They understood that their own survival depended on aligning with the ascendant power. Octavian, ever the astute politician, actively encouraged these defections, offering clemency and rewards to those who abandoned Antony. For Antony and Cleopatra, sailing back to Egypt, the gravity of their situation became increasingly clear. The loss at Actium was not merely a tactical setback, it was a devastating strategic blow that stripped them of their military might, their allies, and perhaps most crucially, their credibility. The once bright vision of a unified Eastern Empire challenging Rome's dominance now lay in ruins. They were no longer contenders for imperial power, but rather fugitives facing an inevitable confrontation with Octavian's triumphant forces. The realization of their impending doom settled upon them, a heavy and inescapable truth. Their options dwindled with each passing day, and the path ahead offered little hope. Upon reaching Egypt, Mark Antony's psychological state deteriorated profoundly. The crushing defeat at Actium, coupled with the rapid unravelling of his power base, plunged him into a deep and pervasive despair. The man who had once been a formidable triumvir, a charismatic general, and a confident leader, now seemed to crumble under the weight of his misfortunes. His once sharp, strategic mind became clouded by an increasing paranoia. He began to suspect plots and betrayals everywhere, even among those who remained loyal. This pervasive distrust further isolated him, creating a chilling atmosphere for those in his immediate circle. The immense pressure, the constant threat of Octavian's advance, and the public humiliation of his defeat eroded his once robust mental fortitude. Antony sought solace, or perhaps oblivion, in increasingly heavy drinking. Alcohol became a frequent companion, dulling the sharp edges of his anxiety and despair, but also further impairing his judgment and resolve. The once disciplined Roman general, celebrated for his military prowess, now seemed to lose himself in a haze of drink and self-pity. This self-destructive pattern only exacerbated his decline, making him less capable of confronting the grim reality that awaited him. The formidable resolve that had characterized his earlier career began to unravel. Decisions became erratic, and his ability to inspire confidence in his remaining supporters waned. He was no longer the decisive leader they had known, but a shadow of his former self consumed by inner turmoil. The once unshakable confidence that had propelled him through numerous campaigns and political struggles was now utterly shattered. He seemed to drift, caught in a current of his own making, unable or unwilling to grasp the reins of control. This profound psychological decline left him vulnerable, both to his internal demons and to the relentless external threat posed by Octavian. The mighty triumvir, once so full of life and ambition, was now a man adrift, lost in the depths of his own despair. With his victory at Actium secured and his political position solidified, Octavian commenced his relentless advance toward Egypt. His legions, disciplined and victorious, moved steadily across the landscape, their progress marked by an inexorable determination. There was no hesitation, no pause in his strategic pursuit of the final remnants of Antony and Cleopatra's power. Octavian's objective was clear: to extinguish the last embers of resistance and bring Egypt firmly under Roman control. As Octavian's forces approached, even the city of Alexandria, once a vibrant centre of Hellenistic culture and power, braced for the inevitable. The final siege began, a stark and sombre spectacle. Antony and Cleopatra, despite their earlier losses and their increasingly precarious situation, made last desperate attempts to resist the overwhelming Roman might. Antony, momentarily roused from his despair, attempted to lead his remaining land forces in a final, defiant stand. There was a desperate skirmish outside the city walls, a fleeting moment of renewed military action. However, the morale of his troops was irrevocably broken, and their numbers were severely depleted. The Roman legions, fresh from their triumphs and superior in both number and spirit, easily repelled these final fragmented efforts. Cleopatra, for her part, had also made preparations, although her options were severely limited. She had attempted to rally what remained of her naval forces, perhaps hoping for some miraculous turn of events, or at least a symbolic resistance. Yet the Egyptian fleet, already weakened and demoralized after Actium, proved incapable of challenging Octavian's formidable navy. Some of her ships even defected, sailing over to the Roman side, further underscoring the futility of their struggle. The siege tightened around Alexandria. The once impregnable defences of the city now seemed fragile against the methodical advance of Octavian's engineers and soldiers. The air was filled with the sounds of conflict, the distant shouts of men, and the rhythmic thud of siege engines. Hope dwindled with each passing day, replaced by a growing sense of inevitability. The great city, a symbol of Cleopatra's reign, was slowly but surely being encircled, its fate sealed by the relentless march of Octavian's victorious army, The final days of Alexandria's siege brought a tragic end to Mark Antony, as Octavian's forces pressed ever closer, and with the last vestiges of his military strength crumbling, Antony received devastating news. A messenger, likely misinformed or deliberately misleading, brought word that Cleopatra had taken her own life. This false report, delivered at a moment of utter despair and defeat, shattered any remaining will within him. Antony, once a triumvir, a formidable general, and a figure of immense power, found himself utterly isolated and without hope. The vision of a glorious future with Cleopatra, of an Eastern Empire, had dissolved into dust. The shame of his defeats, the widespread desertions, and the knowledge of Octavian's imminent triumph weighed heavily upon his spirit. The news of Cleopatra's supposed death was the final, unbearable blow. In his anguish, and believing he had nothing left to live for, Antony resolved to follow her into death. He called upon his loyal freedman Eros to assist him in this final act. Eros, however, could not bring himself to harm his master. Instead, in a testament to his devotion, Eros took his own life first, falling upon his sword before Antony's eyes. Witnessing this poignant act, Antony, now more determined, took his own sword. With a heavy heart and a mind clouded by sorrow and misapprehension, he plunged the blade into himself. It was a desperate and painful end, not swift or clean. The wound was mortal, but it did not bring immediate release. His attendants, discovering him gravely wounded, carried him to Cleopatra. She had in fact barricaded herself in a monument, a secure structure within the city, possibly with the intention of negotiating with Octavian or to protect herself from capture. It was here, in her presence, that Antony finally succumbed. He was hoisted up into the monument, a difficult and agonizing process, to be with her one last time. In those final moments, he lay in Cleopatra's arms, fading away. The misunderstanding that precipitated his suicide, the belief that she had already departed this world, added a profound layer of pathos to his demise. His death marked not only the end of a grand Roman career, but also the tragic culmination of a deeply entangled personal and political alliance, when, brought to its sorrowful conclusion by the relentless forces of history and a cruel twist of fate. With Antony gone, Cleopatra remained barricaded in her monument, her situation increasingly dire. Octavian's forces were now firmly in control of Alexandria. The queen, though besieged and isolated, still possessed a formidable intellect and a deep understanding of power dynamics. She understood that her life, and perhaps the lives of her children, depended on her ability to negotiate with the victor. Octavian, for his part, was keenly aware of Cleopatra's intelligence and her capacity for influence. He knew that to secure his triumph fully, he needed her alive. His primary objective was to parade her through the streets of Rome during his triumphal procession, and is a spectacle that would symbolize his complete victory over the East and the final eradication of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Therefore, he issued orders that she was to be captured unharmed. As Octavian's soldiers approached the monument, a critical moment unfolded. One of his officers, a man named Gaius Proculeius, devised a clever strategy. While some soldiers engaged Cleopatra in conversation at the monument's entrance, distracting her and her attendants, Proculeius and a small group of men scaled the walls from the opposite side using ladders. This element of surprise was crucial. They gained entry into the monument and quickly overpowered Cleopatra's attendants, securing the queen before she could react or take any drastic measures herself. Cleopatra was taken into custody, yet her initial attempts to resist or escape rendered futile by the swift and decisive action of Octavian's men. Despite her capture, Cleopatra did not immediately abandon hope. She was brought before Octavian, and a series of meetings took place. During these encounters, Cleopatra, ever the diplomat, employed all her considerable charm and rhetorical skill. She presented herself as a grieving monarch, a mother concerned for her children's future, and a ruler who could still be valuable to Rome. Her primary aim was to secure her children's safety, and if possible to negotiate terms that would allow her to retain some semblance of her former position, or at least avoid the humiliation of a Roman triumph. She offered Octavian an inventory of her treasures, attempting to appease him and demonstrate her willingness to cooperate. Octavian listened, polite but unyielding. He offered vague reassurances regarding her children, careful not to commit to anything concrete that might compromise his ultimate plans. He subtly conveyed that, while her life might be spared, her fate as a captive was sealed. Her attempts at persuasion, so effective with Caesar and Antony, now met with the cold, calculating resolve of a new kind of Roman leader. Despite her initial attempts at negotiation and her compelling pleas, Cleopatra slowly began to grasp the true nature of her captivity. Octavian's polite but firm demeanour, his evasive answers regarding her future, and the unwavering surveillance of her guards began to paint a clear, stark picture. She was not a queen negotiating her terms, but a prize of war destined for a public spectacle. The prospect of being paraded through the streets of Rome, displayed as defeated foe in Octavian's triumphal procession, was an unbearable thought for Cleopatra. For a woman who had meticulously cultivated an image of divine royalty, who had seen herself as the embodiment of Egypt's ancient power, such an indignity represented the ultimate degradation. It would not merely be a personal humiliation, but an insult to her ancestors, to the very concept of her sacred lineage. The queen, who had commanded armies and enchanted emperors, could not endure being reduced to a mere captive, a living trophy for her conqueror. This realization solidified her resolve. Cleopatra understood that while Octavian desired her alive for his triumph, he could not force her to participate if she chose otherwise. Yet her determination to avoid this fate became absolute. She began to consider her options with a calm, deliberate focus, despite her outwardly despairing state. Her captors, aware of the possibility of suicide, intensified their vigilance. They searched her person and her chambers for any hidden weapons or poisons. Every meal was tasted, every object scrutinized. Yet Cleopatra, with her profound knowledge of Egyptian law and her access to subtle means, knew there were ways to circumvent such precautions. She began to subtly test the limits of her confinement, observing the routines of her guards and the vulnerabilities in their security. Her immediate concern shifted from negotiation to escape, not from her prison, but from the ignominy of Rome. She feigned illness, a common tactic, to gain a measure of privacy and to lull her guards into a false sense of security regarding her intentions. This period of quiet contemplation and strategic planning marked a significant turning point in her final days. The queen who had fought for her kingdom and her children now fought for her dignity, determined to author her own ending, free from the dictates of her Roman conqueror. The traditional account of Cleopatra's death, etched deeply into historical memory, speaks of a final deliberate act carried out on August 12th, 30 BCE. Having resolved to avoid the humiliation of Octavian's triumph, she is said to have chosen a method that was both swift and imbued with ancient Egyptian symbolism. According to this enduring narrative, an asp, or Egyptian cobra, was smuggled into her chambers, hidden within a basket of figs. The snake, he is revered in Egypt as a symbol of divine royalty and protection, particularly of the pharaohs, offered a means of death that was both culturally significant and, importantly, discreet. It allowed her to escape Octavian's grasp without resorting to a public or violent struggle that might have been thwarted. The imagery is vivid and profound. Cleopatra, after perhaps writing a final letter to Octavian, requesting burial alongside Antony, prepared herself for this ultimate journey. Some accounts suggest she placed the asp directly upon her breast, allowing its venom to enter her bloodstream. Others imply she may have provoked it with a small stick, ensuring its bite. The venom of the asp was known for its rapid and relatively painless effect, inducing a peaceful slumber that led to death. While the exact details of how the snake was introduced and precisely how she died have been debated by historians, with some suggesting poison or even a different type of snake, the enduring image of the asp remains central to her story. It is the most widely accepted and artistically depicted version of her final moments. This choice, regardless of the precise mechanism, underscores her determination. It allowed her to die as a queen on her own terms, rather than living as a spectacle for a foreign conqueror. The Roman guards, upon discovering her, found her lifeless, perhaps with her 2 loyal handmaidens also fallen beside her, succumbing to the same fate or choosing to follow their queen. There was no struggle, no apparent violence, only the stillness of a queen who had chosen her own departure. In the quiet, final moments within Cleopatra's chambers, the narrative extends beyond the queen herself to include the unwavering devotion of her closest attendants. 2 figures, in particular, Iris and Charmian, are consistently named in historical accounts as having shared her ultimate fate. Their presence in this tragic scene adds a layer of profound loyalty and personal sacrifice to Cleopatra's end. These women were more than mere servants. They were confidants, companions who had likely been with Cleopatra for many years, witnessing her triumphs and her struggles. They had shared in her life at the height of her power and remained by her side as her fortunes waned. Their bond transcended the typical mistress-servant relationship, evolving into one of deep personal connection and trust. The accounts suggest that Iris and Charmian did not abandon their queen when all seemed lost. Instead, they chose to remain with her, even unto death. This act speaks volumes about their allegiance and perhaps their own understanding of the dire circumstances facing their sovereign. To be paraded in Rome as part of a conqueror's spoils would have been a humiliation not only for Cleopatra, but also for those intimately associated with her. The details surrounding their deaths vary slightly across ancient sources, but the essence remains consistent. They died alongside Cleopatra. Some accounts suggest that Eros may have succumbed first, collapsing at her queen's feet. Charmian, witnessing this, is then said to have adjusted Cleopatra's diadem, ensuring her queen appeared regal even in death, before allowing herself to be bitten by a second asp, or perhaps sharing the one that had dispatched Cleopatra. This final gesture by Charmian, adjusting the diadem, is particularly poignant. It symbolizes a defiant act of preserving dignity and asserting royal status even in the face of absolute defeat. It was a silent statement that Cleopatra, even in death, remained the sovereign queen of Egypt, unbowed by Roman conquest. The loyalty of Iris and Charmian, choosing to share their queen's fate rather than endure a life of subjugation or separation, serves as a powerful testament to the personal bonds forged within Cleopatra's court and the profound respect they held for their ruler. Their deaths complete the sombre tableau of a dynasty's end, marked by both the queen's resolve and her companion's unwavering devotion. Cleopatra's death marked not merely the end of a single life, but the definitive close of an entire epoch for Egypt. Her demise extinguished the last flame of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a lineage of Greek rulers who had governed Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, since the time of Alexander the Great. With her passing, the Hellenistic period in Egypt concluded, and with it, the era of independent pharaonic rule that had spanned millennia. For thousands of years, Egypt had maintained its distinct identity, ruled by pharaohs whether native Egyptians or in later centuries the Greek Ptolemies, who adopted many pharaonic traditions. Cleopatra, the seventh Philopator, was the last in this long succession to sit on the throne as a sovereign monarch. Her efforts to preserve Egypt's independence through alliances and strategic manoeuvring had ultimately failed against the relentless expansion of a Roman power. Octavian's victory was complete. With Cleopatra gone, there was no legitimate heir to rally around, no independent power structure left to challenge Roman authority. Egypt, a land of immense agricultural wealth, particularly its grain supply, was too valuable to be left to its own devices. It was formally annexed and transformed into a Roman province, but with a unique status. Unlike other provinces governed by senatorial appointees, Egypt became the personal domain of the Roman emperor. This arrangement ensured that its vast resources, especially its vital grain, flowed directly to Rome, supporting its populace and its armies. The annexation was swift and decisive. Octavian understood the strategic importance of Egypt and moved quickly to integrate it into the Roman sphere. The ancient land, once a beacon of civilization and a formidable power in its own right, was now a crucial dependency of the burgeoning Roman Empire. The Nile, which had sustained pharaohs and kingdoms for countless generations, now nourished the Roman Imperium. Cleopatra's death thus symbolizes a pivotal moment in ancient history. It represented the final absorption of the Hellenistic East into the Roman orbit and the silencing of the last great independent voice of ancient Egypt. The transition was profound, shifting Egypt from a powerful kingdom with its own foreign policy and dynastic succession to a Roman breadbasket, its future irrevocably tied to the dictates of Rome. The long unbroken chain of pharaonic rule, and stretching back to the earliest dynasties, had finally reached its ultimate conclusion. With Cleopatra's death, the immediate threat to Octavian's conquest of Egypt seemed to subside. Yet, one lingering concern remained, a figure who, though young and largely without power, represented a profound symbolic challenge to his own carefully constructed legitimacy. This was Caesarion, Cleopatra's son by Julius Caesar. Caesarion, whose full name was Ptolemy XV Caesar, had been elevated by his mother as co-ruler of Egypt. His existence was a living testament to Julius Caesar's liaison with Cleopatra, and crucially, he was the only known biological son of the revered Roman dictator. For Octavian, who had meticulously cultivated his image as Caesar's adopted son and rightful heir, Caesarion's very presence was an intolerable affront. If Caesarion were to live, he could at any point become a rallying point for those who might question Octavian's claim to Caesar's legacy, and by extension, his supreme authority in Rome. Cleopatra, foreseeing the danger, had attempted to send Caesarion away, along with a significant sum of treasure to safety in India. She had hoped to secure his future, perhaps envisioning a distant life beyond the reach of Roman politics. However, this desperate plan was thwarted. Caesarion's tutor, a man named Rhodan, was persuaded by Octavian's agents to betray the young prince. Lured back to Egypt under false pretenses, or perhaps simply intercepted before he could reach his destination, Caesarion was captured. Upon his return, the decision regarding Caesarion's fate lay squarely with Octavian. The historical accounts suggest that Octavian sought counsel from his advisors, particularly Arius Didymus, a philosopher from Alexandria. The advice given was stark and pragmatic. Too many Caesars is not a good thing. This counsel resonated with Octavian's ruthless ambition and his understanding of power dynamics. Caesarion, barely 17 years old, was swiftly executed. His death was a cold, calculated act, designed to eliminate any potential rival to Octavian's status as the sole legitimate heir of Julius Caesar. It was a clear demonstration of the unforgiving nature of political power in the Roman world, where even a young, distant claimant could not be allowed to survive, for they posed a symbolic threat to a burgeoning empire. With Caesarion gone, Octavian's claim to Caesar's name and legacy was undisputed, paving the way for his transformation into Augustus, the first Roman emperor. While Caesarion's fate was sealed by the political necessities of Octavian, the children born of Cleopatra's union with Mark Antony faced a different, though equally uncertain, future. 3 children had come from this powerful alliance: the twins Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene II, and their younger brother Ptolemy Philadelphus. Their young lives had been spent amidst the opulence of the Egyptian court, and for a time they had been declared rulers over vast territories during the donations of Alexandria. Now, with their parents deceased, and Egypt a Roman province, their destiny rested entirely in Octavian's hands. Unlike Caesarion, who represented a direct challenge to Octavian's claim as Caesar's heir, and Antony and Cleopatra's children posed a less immediate, though still significant, political threat. Octavian, ever the astute manipulator of public perception, chose a different path for them. He brought the 3 young children to Rome. This act served multiple purposes. It showcased his victory, allowing him to parade the last heirs of the Ptolemaic dynasty and Antony's family before the Roman populace. Yet, he did not treat them with the same severity as Caesarion. Instead, Octavian entrusted the care of Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene II, and Ptolemy Philadelphus to his own sister, Octavia the Younger. Octavia, the former wife of Mark Antony, was known for her virtuous character and maternal compassion. She took the children into her own household, raising them alongside her own children and those of Antony from previous marriages. This decision by Octavian was a masterful stroke of propaganda, demonstrating his magnanimity and contrasting sharply with the ruthless image often associated with Roman conquerors. It allowed him to appear merciful while still neutralizing any potential threat. Of the 3, Cleopatra Selene II is the one whose story is most clearly illuminated by history. Her twin brother Alexander Helios and younger brother Ptolemy Philadelphus seem to have faded from the historical record, likely dying young or living out their lives in obscurity within the Roman world. However, Cleopatra Selene II not only survived but thrived. She received a Roman education, absorbing the culture and customs of her captors. In a remarkable turn of events, Octavian, now Augustus, arranged for Cleopatra Selene II to marry Juba II, the king of Mauritania, and Juba was himself a Romanized prince, a scholar, and a client king who ruled a kingdom in North Africa. This marriage served Augustus's strategic interests, placing a loyal ruler on the Mauritanian throne and further integrating the region into the Roman sphere of influence. Cleopatra Selene II became Queen of Mauritania, a vast territory that encompassed parts of modern-day Morocco and Algeria. In Mauritania, Cleopatra Selene II and Juba II established a flourishing court. They transformed their capital, Caesarea, into a vibrant centre of Hellenistic and Roman culture, adorned with magnificent architecture and art. Selene, carrying the bloodline of both the Ptolemies and the Antonys, brought a touch of the old Hellenistic glory to her new kingdom. She effectively ruled alongside her husband, proving to be an intelligent and capable queen. Her coins depict her with symbols of both Roman and Egyptian heritage, a testament to her unique background. Her life represents a poignant glimmer of hope amidst the profound tragedy that befell her family, a quiet legacy of Cleopatra's lineage continuing to shape a corner of the ancient world. With Egypt secured as a Roman possession and the last vestiges of the Ptolemaic dynasty extinguished, Octavian's path to unchallenged power was now clear. He had meticulously dismantled every opposing force, eliminating both the adult heirs of Cleopatra and integrating her surviving younger children into the Roman system. His return to Rome was not merely a journey home, but a carefully orchestrated spectacle of unparalleled triumph designed to cement his authority and inaugurate a new era, where the year 29 BCE saw Octavian celebrate a triple triumph in Rome, a lavish display that lasted for 3 consecutive days. Each day was dedicated to a specific victory, the first for his Dalmatian campaigns, the second for Actium, and the third and most significant for the conquest of Egypt. The streets of Rome were thronged with citizens, eager to witness the culmination of years of civil war and the glorification of their new leader. Vast amounts of Egyptian gold, silver, and precious artifacts, spoils of Octavian's victory, were paraded through the city, filling the Roman treasury and dazzling the populace. Among the most captivating elements of the procession were the captives. Though Cleopatra herself had famously evaded this humiliation through her death, effigies of her and Antony were carried, depicting their final moments, while further solidifying Octavian's narrative of triumph over an exotic, dangerous queen and a corrupted Roman general. The surviving children of Antony and Cleopatra, though not paraded as public captives, were present in Rome, a silent testament to the completeness of Octavian's victory and his subsequent mercy. This grand spectacle was more than just a celebration of military success. It was a profound political statement. Octavian had not merely defeated his enemies, he had brought peace after decades of internal strife. He had avenged Caesar, restored Roman dignity, and secured the wealth of Egypt for the Roman people. The triumph served to legitimize his rule, portraying him as the saviour of the Republic, the one destined to bring stability and prosperity. The years following this triumph marked a pivotal transformation in Roman history. Octavian, with his power now absolute, began the careful process of restructuring the Roman state. He understood that simply seizing power through force would not guarantee lasting stability. Instead, he sought to create an illusion of restoring the Republic, while subtly consolidating all essential powers into his own hands. In 27 BCE, Octavian formally restored the Republic to the Senate and the Roman people. In return, the Senate bestowed upon him the honorific title of Augustus, meaning the revered one, a name that carried religious and moral authority. This was not merely a new name, it signified a new identity and a new role. With this act, Octavian, the victor of the civil wars, became Augustus, the first Roman emperor, ushering in the Pax Romana, a period of unprecedented peace and stability that would endure for centuries. The Roman Republic, in all but name, had ended, and the Roman Empire had begun, largely built upon the foundations laid by Octavian's decisive victory over Antony and Cleopatra. This new world order, forged in the wake of the battle for Egypt, would profoundly shape the course of Western civilization. As the dust settled on the age of civil wars and the Roman Empire took shape, a particular narrative surrounding Cleopatra began to solidify. Much of what subsequent generations have come to understand about her life, her character, and her reign is filtered through the lens of Roman historiography. These accounts, written predominantly by those loyal to Octavian and the new imperial order, were not dispassionate observations but rather deliberate constructions shaped by political necessity and cultural biases. The primary Roman historians who wrote about Cleopatra, such as Cassius Dio, Plutarch and Appian, lived decades, or even a century or more after her death. They relied on earlier sources, many of which were themselves contemporary to the events, but inherently partisan. These writers were often keen to portray Octavian, later Augustus, in the most favourable light, and this often necessitated casting his adversaries in the darkest possible terms. Cleopatra, as the last great Hellenistic monarch to challenge Roman supremacy, and as the foreign queen who had captivated two of Rome's most powerful men became a convenient and potent target for Roman propaganda. She was frequently depicted as an oriental temptress, a figure of exotic allure and dangerous cunning, who ensnared Roman generals with her charms, leading them astray from their duty to Rome. This trope served multiple purposes. It justified Octavian's war against Antony, framing it not as a civil war against a fellow Roman, but as a righteous struggle against a foreign threat who had bewitched a noble Roman into betraying his homeland. Her intelligence, her linguistic prowess, and her diplomatic skills, which were significant aspects of her actual reign, were often downplayed or twisted into sinister manipulations. Instead, emphasis was placed on her supposed decadence, her lavish lifestyle, and her alleged moral corruption. The image of her as a seductress, a manipulative sorceress, and a dangerous Eastern queen became deeply ingrained, overshadowing her role as a shrewd political leader and a devoted monarch. The Roman narrative painted Cleopatra as a threat to Roman morality and stability. Her ambition for an independent, powerful Hellenistic kingdom, potentially rivaling Rome, was reinterpreted as mere personal vanity and a thirst for power for its own sake. Her relationship with Julius Caesar, and later with Mark Antony, was stripped of its strategic and political dimensions, reduced instead to scandalous affairs driven by lust and manipulation. Even her suicide, an act of profound dignity in her own cultural context, was sometimes presented by Roman authors as a final, desperate act of a vanquished foe, rather than a conscious choice to preserve her royal honour. The Roman lens thus distorted her image, transforming a complex and capable ruler into a caricature, a symbol of the foreign dangers that Rome had overcome. This enduring Roman perspective has profoundly influenced how Cleopatra has been understood through the ages, often obscuring the historical woman beneath layers of politically motivated fiction. Beyond the immediate Roman propaganda, Cleopatra's image has undergone a continuous process of reinterpretation throughout the centuries. Each era has, in its own way, projected its fascinations, fears, and ideals onto her enigmatic figure, reshaping her from the villainous of Roman accounts to a myriad of other personas. In the medieval period, she often remained a symbol of moral warning, a foreign queen whose illicit loves led to her downfall. However, with the Renaissance, a shift began to occur, and as classical texts were rediscovered and re-evaluated, artists and writers started to find new facets in her story. She emerged not merely as a temptress, but as a tragic queen, a figure of grand ambition and ultimate defeat, often viewed through a lens of romanticized sorrow. The Elizabethan era, particularly with Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra, cemented her place in Western consciousness as a powerful, passionate, and deeply complex woman. Here, she is not simply a seductress, but a sovereign with immense political will, capable of inspiring profound love and loyalty, even if her fate is tragic. Shakespeare's portrayal endowed her with a dramatic depth that transcended earlier, simpler condemnations. In subsequent centuries, especially the 18th and 19th, the Romantic movement further emphasized her as an exotic and passionate figure. Artists depicted her in lavish settings, often focusing on her beauty and her dramatic end. The allure of the Orient combined with the tragic grandeur of her story made her an irresistible subject for painters, poets, and eventually opera composers. The 20th and 21st centuries have seen even more diverse interpretations. With the rise of feminism, some have viewed Cleopatra as an early example of a powerful female leader operating in a male-dominated world, a woman who wielded significant political and personal agency. Others have critically examined the persistent Oriental temptress stereotype, seeking to deconstruct the biases embedded in historical and artistic representations. From Hollywood epics that highlighted her glamour and romantic entanglements, to scholarly works that strive to reconstruct her political acumen and her role as a pharaoh, Cleopatra remains a canvas upon which different ages paint their understanding of power, gender, love, and destiny. Her image is not static, but a living, evolving construct, continually reshaped by the values and perspectives of those who engage with her story. Cleopatra's captivating story has provided an inexhaustible source of inspiration for creators across diverse artistic mediums, allowing her legend to resonate through the ages. Her presence in literature, art, and music is a testament to the enduring power of her narrative, as artists have consistently found new ways to explore the various facets of her life and demise. In literature, William Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra stands as perhaps the most influential interpretation. Penned in the early 17th century, this tragedy transcends simple historical recounting, delving into the complexities of love, power, and duty. Shakespeare portrays Cleopatra not merely as a foreign queen, but as a figure of immense charisma, intelligence, and a deeply passionate nature, whose love for Antony is both her strength and her undoing. His vivid poetry captures her mercurial temperament, her regal bearing, and her ultimate dignified defiance in the face of Roman conquest. Beyond Shakespeare, Cleopatra's story has been reimagined in countless other literary works, from historical novels to romantic poems. John Dryden's All for Love, a Restoration-era play, offered a neoclassical take on the same narrative, focusing on themes of honour and sacrifice. Later authors, like George Bernard Shaw in Caesar and Cleopatra, infused her character with wit and sharp political intellect, presenting her as a shrewd and calculating young queen. In the realm of opera, Cleopatra has inspired some of the most dramatic and enduring compositions. George Friedrich Handel's Giulio Cesare in Egitto, first performed in 1724, features a magnificent portrayal of Cleopatra, blending intricate arias with a narrative of political manoeuvring and passionate romance. Other composers, including Jules Massenet and Samuel Barber, also found inspiration in her story, crafting works that explore her exotic allure and tragic fate through soaring melodies and dramatic libretti. Painting and sculpture have also been profoundly shaped by Cleopatra's image. From neoclassical depictions that emphasize her classical beauty and regal poise, often at the moment of her death, to more romantic and orientalist interpretations that highlight her exoticism and sensuality, artists have consistently sought to capture her essence. Jean-Léon Gérôme's Cleopatra Before Caesar illustrates her strategic charm, while Guido Reni's The Death of Cleopatra focuses on her final poignant act. Sculptors have envisioned her in various forms, from marble busts that convey her queenly authority to more allegorical figures representing the fall of a great empire. Each brushstroke and chisel mark has contributed to the rich tapestry of her artistic legacy, ensuring that Cleopatra's legend continues to fascinate and inspire. In the modern era, Cleopatra's story continues to captivate, finding new life in the pervasive mediums of cinema, television, and popular culture. These contemporary interpretations often amplify her mystique, shaping public perception and ensuring her legacy remains vibrant and endlessly debated. Perhaps the most iconic cinematic portrayal is Elizabeth Taylor's performance in the 1963 film Cleopatra. This epic production, renowned for its lavish sets, extravagant costumes, and its monumental budget, presented Cleopatra as a figure of unparalleled beauty, ambition, and tragic romance. Taylor's commanding presence and striking appearance cemented an image of Cleopatra in the popular imagination that persist to this day, a powerful queen, a formidable lover, and a woman who commanded the attention of the world's most powerful men. The film, while taking liberties with historical accuracy for dramatic effect, underscored the grand scale of her life and her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, making her accessible to a global audience in a way that previous artistic renditions could not. Beyond this landmark film, Cleopatra has appeared in numerous other cinematic ventures, each offering a distinct lens through which to view her. Some films have focused on her political acumen, others on her romantic entanglements, and still others on the tragic end of her reign. These diverse portrayals reflect evolving cultural attitudes towards female power, sexuality, and leadership. On television, Cleopatra's story has been explored in documentaries, miniseries, and even fictionalized dramas. These productions often seek to balance historical research with engaging storytelling, attempting to peel back layers of myth and propaganda to reveal the woman behind the legend. Documentaries frequently delve into archaeological findings and scholarly interpretations, providing insights into her Hellenistic background and the political landscape of her time. Fictional series, meanwhile, might explore character motivations and emotional arcs with greater freedom, bringing her complex personality to a new generation of viewers. In broader popular culture, Cleopatra's image has become a shorthand for exotic beauty, power, and seduction. Her name frequently appears in fashion, music, and advertising, invoking an aura of ancient grandeur and timeless allure. From makeup lines to song lyrics, her name carries an immediate recognition, often evoking a powerful, enigmatic female figure. This ubiquitous presence ensures that even those unfamiliar with the intricate details of her history possess a general understanding of her iconic status. Modern interpretations, whether on the grand screen or in fleeting cultural references, perpetually reinvent Cleopatra, cementing her as an enduring symbol whose mystique continues to evolve with each passing generation. Beyond the romanticized narratives and the vilifying propaganda, the true historical significance of Cleopatra rests upon her formidable intellect and unwavering political will. She was not merely a figure of beauty or seduction, but a ruler of profound capability, operating within a complex and dangerous geopolitical landscape. Her actions, often misconstrued, yet were consistently aimed at preserving the autonomy and prosperity of her ancient kingdom. Cleopatra possessed an extraordinary intellect, evident in her renowned linguistic abilities. Unlike her Ptolemaic predecessors, who maintained a steadfast adherence to Greek, Cleopatra took the unusual and significant step of learning Egyptian. This act alone demonstrated a remarkable commitment to her people and her land, allowing her to communicate directly with her subjects, priests, and administrators without the need for interpreters. This fluency in multiple languages, including Greek, Egyptian, Aramaic, Hebrew, Ethiopian, and Latin, among others, made her an exceptionally rare and gifted ruler, capable of engaging with diverse cultures and peoples on their own terms. Such a skill was not merely academic, it was a potent diplomatic tool, fostering understanding and respect in an often hostile world. Her political astuteness was equally striking. From her earliest days on the throne, Cleopatra navigated treacherous court intrigues, civil wars, and the ever-encroaching shadow of Roman power. She understood the precarious position of Egypt, a wealthy prize coveted by Rome, and she consistently sought to protect its independence. Her alliances with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony, while often framed through a romantic lens, were fundamentally strategic decisions. They were calculated attempts to leverage Roman influence to counter internal threats and external pressures, ensuring Egypt's survival as a sovereign state. She was a master of diplomacy, capable of charming and persuading, but also firm and decisive when necessary. Cleopatra fought fiercely for her kingdom, employing every tool at her disposal: her intelligence, her charm, her resources, and her strategic alliances. She understood the power dynamics of her era with remarkable clarity, recognizing that Egypt's best chance lay in aligning with a powerful Roman general rather than attempting to resist Rome outright. Her struggle was against overwhelming odds, a desperate fight to maintain a distinct Egyptian identity and independence in a world increasingly dominated by a burgeoning Roman Empire. Her ultimate failure to preserve Egypt's sovereignty does not diminish the brilliance of her efforts or the depth of her commitment. She was, in essence, a fiercely independent ruler who used her considerable gifts to champion her kingdom against the tide of history. The passage of more than 2 millennia has done little to diminish the captivating power of Cleopatra's story. She remains an enduring enigma, a figure whose life continues to draw us into the ancient world, inviting contemplation and sparking the imagination. Her narrative is a tapestry woven with threads of grand ambition, profound love, devastating loss, and the monumental clash of empires that reshaped the course of Western history. Her life was lived at a pivotal moment, a fulcrum upon which the fate of the Hellenistic East and the burgeoning Roman Republic balanced. She was the last independent pharaoh of Egypt, a ruler who stood firm against the inexorable expansion of Rome, employing every facet of her intellect and charm to secure her kingdom's survival. Her decisions, her alliances, and her ultimate fate were intertwined with the most powerful men of her age, creating a drama of truly epic proportions. Cleopatra's legacy extends far beyond the historical facts of her reign. She has become a multifaceted symbol, a vessel for countless interpretations across time and culture. To some, she embodies feminine power and an unconquerable spirit. To others, she represents exotic allure and tragic romance. She is often seen as a brilliant strategist, a queen who dared to challenge Rome, and a woman who chose her own dignified end rather than endure humiliation. Her story speaks to universal themes that resonate across generations: the pursuit of power, the complexities of love and betrayal, the struggle for independence against overwhelming odds, and the often fateful interplay between personal destiny and the grand sweep of historical events. The enduring fascination with Cleopatra lies in this rich complexity, in the way her life encapsulates so much of the human experience against a backdrop of world-altering change. She remains, and likely always will, one of history's most compelling and unforgettable figures. As the echoes of Cleopatra's world begin to gently fade, we conclude our quiet journey through the annals of antiquity. We have traversed the intricate landscapes of Hellenistic Egypt, observed the shifting sands of Roman power, and witnessed the unfolding of a truly remarkable life. From her early struggles for the throne to her final resolute act, we have borne witness to a queen who navigated a world on the cusp of immense change, relieving an indelible mark on history. This quiet observation of her reign, her alliances, and her ultimate fate has allowed us to ponder the complexities of leadership, the weight of empire, and the enduring human spirit. We have moved slowly through the centuries, allowing the details of her existence to settle, much like dust motes dancing in a beam of ancient light. Her story, filled with both triumphs and tragedies, offers a window into an era long past, yet it continues to speak to us in whispers across the ages. Now, as the narrative draws to a close and the distant sounds of Alexandria and Rome recede, we invite a peaceful descent into rest. Let the final images of this ancient world, the strategic brilliance, the grand ambitions, and the poignant end of a dynasty drift softly from your mind. Carry only the quiet satisfaction of having contemplated a life of extraordinary depth and consequence. Allow the gentle currents of history to carry you towards a restful slumber. The sun has set on Cleopatra's Egypt, and a profound silence now descends upon the historical stage. May the echoes of her story, the quiet dignity of her final choices, and the vast sweep of the past guide you into a deep and tranquil sleep. All that remains is the profound stillness, a space for quiet contemplation as the distant past becomes one with the present moment of peace.